I found myself standing outside the club, grappling with the realization that Linda had chosen to spend the night with Mark Lavalier, the celebrated football player on our local Sharks team. I was uncertain about my next steps. It became clear to me that our marriage was irreparably damaged, and I was unable to envision a path towards forgiveness for the immense humiliation she had inflicted upon me. The incident was being filmed by numerous individuals, and it was only a matter of time before it made its way onto the internet. I found myself contemplating Linda's motives. Had she truly assumed that I would readily forgive and move on from this incident? Upon her return home, she was in for a significant surprise. I then proceeded to the hotel where we had planned to spend our special night and made our way to our room. As I entered, I formulated a strategy that I deemed to be both effective and, at the same time, somewhat unpleasant. When I saw the evening gown she had purchased from Victoria's Secret for our special night, I was overcome with emotion. I was overcome with emotion throughout the entire night and collapsed onto the bed, sobbing uncontrollably. My wife, the love of my life, the rock I return home to every day, the mother of my children, the woman I loved more than life itself, she had deceived me for a single night of pleasure. At that moment, a voice from my time in the army spoke up, urging me to rise, manage myself, and do what was necessary to survive. I was ashamed of my weakness, realizing that I was more than that. I hadn't. After 6 weeks of visiting the Taliban, I was overcome with emotion and self-pity. I gathered my belongings and left Linda's room, returning home. I stopped by the Goodson residence to collect Tommy, aged 13, and Gail, aged 15. They were still awake and had just gone to bed. I urged them to get dressed and pack their belongings to return home. May Goodson inquired about Linda's whereabouts. I chose not to provide a fabricated account and instead informed her of the truth. I was uncertain of her whereabouts. She had departed with another man. May was taken aback and inquired about my next course of action. I replied that I had not yet made a decision, which was not entirely accurate. I had already determined my next action, which would depend on Linda's return. Upon reaching the house, it was no longer recognizable. I instructed the children to pack for a 2-week stay. When they inquired about their mother's whereabouts, I informed them of the truth. She elected to depart with another gentleman she held in higher regard than I. I am uncertain as to the timing and likelihood of her return. I offer my sincerest apologies, but I believe you are mature enough to comprehend the reality of the situation. Tommy began to weep, and Gail embraced him, pulling him close before turning her gaze to me and inquiring if I intended to divorce her mother. I do not perceive another viable option. If you divorce her, it will be to her advantage. She did not have Tommy or me in her thoughts when she left. The words of children can be a source of profound insight. At that moment, I was immensely proud of Gail. If divorce were to occur, I would prefer to remain in the family home. Tommy ceased crying and said, "Daddy, I want to live with you too. Mommy no longer loves us, otherwise she would not have left." I embraced each of them and added, "I'm sure Mom loves you both very much." However, when she departed, she was completely out of it. "Gail, where do we go, Daddy?" "We are going to see my Uncle Wes. I'll tell you everything. I will be unavailable for the remainder of the day, but I require assistance from Tommy in packing. I will be in my office. I have a number of tasks to complete. First and foremost, I intend to preserve my finances. I have already taken the following steps. I went to the bank, paid off and cancelled our credit cards, and transferred all of our funds to a joint account. I had a separate account where I paid for birthdays, Christmas, anniversaries, and a cruise I had planned for her. I transferred all of the funds except $20 to the joint account. I transferred $20,000 into my account, which should have sufficed for Linda for a few months while she looked for work. I prepared a statement transferring sole ownership of the property and its contents to Linda. I cancelled Linda's country club and gym memberships. I then proceeded to open one by one Linda's social media sites to explain why I had left Linda. I videotaped Linda dancing with an unidentified individual and shared the footage on her page. In the process of doing so, I realized I had inadvertently left the recording function on, resulting in the entire episode being recorded until I left the club. The audio was only captured because my phone was. I had the evidence in my possession, and it was compelling, so I proceeded to share it on her social media page. I then disseminated the recording to the entirety of her contact list, which included her parents and sister. I appended a brief message to the effect that this was why I had departed from Linda's company. I also transmitted the complete package to the local newspaper and the nightly television program, Celebrity Behavior. The exhibition organizer contacted me shortly thereafter and inquired as to whether I could corroborate any of the information. I provided him with the video and informed him that Linda was in the company of Mark at the time of our conversation. He then extended an invitation for me to appear on his program, but I declined, citing my absence from the area. However, he could contact me via email, so I provided him with my address. I then called my uncle, Jules, in France and explained what had transpired. I inquired as to whether we might stay with him for a period of time. He expressed remorse for Linda's actions and extended an invitation for us to remain with him for as long as we desired. The subsequent telephone conversation, I proceeded to contact my superior at home to inform him of the situation. I was offered the position of production manager at our French plant due to the retirement of the previous manager. I thanked him for the opportunity but respectfully declined. I was reluctant to leave my family and questioned whether I should reconsider. I was fluent in French because my mother was French. My father was English, and I held dual citizenship. I possessed both British and French passports, which proved advantageous. He answered the phone on the fourth ring and stated, "This better be important." I informed him of the circumstances and inquired about the status of the position. He expressed remorse for Linda's actions and informed me that the role was still available. I outlined my plans and he concurred that I should take a month's leave before assuming the new role. I agreed to contact him and then terminated the call. I then retrieved our passport reports, the children's birth certificates, and the $5 I had set aside funds for unforeseen circumstances. Additionally, I retrieved all photographs from my military service from the office walls, removed them from their frames, and packed them for transport. The subsequent step proved the most challenging. I encouraged my children to compose a letter to their mother, expressing their affection and commitment. I then proceeded to draft a brief missive to her. "Linda, you exhibited your affection for me last night by departing with your romantic interest and rendering me the object of ridicule in the presence of your companions. I use the term companions because they all supported your actions and intervened so that you could escape accountability. I have never experienced such excruciating pain as I did last night, and I am unable to forgive you for your actions. I would say that I am devastated, but you are well aware that I will simply move on and rebuild my life without you. I took the children with me because it is evident that you did not consider their needs when you left with your lover and now you will not miss them. I informed the children of your actions in a gentler manner to avoid placing you in a negative light. I requested that they write you a farewell letter, but I am unaware of its contents as I instructed them to seal the envelopes. I reassured the children that you love them. I have informed the children that they will contact you once we have established a new residence. I hope that you will come to regret your actions, both with regard to me and the children. I strongly advise you to seek the assistance of a mental health professional to determine the underlying causes of your behavior. D advised me to forgive you, citing the temporary nature of your actions and the influence of your celebrity status. In your situation, I advise a similar approach. I will return home in the morning as if nothing occurred and we will resume our lives as usual. What have you been smoking? My advice is to seek an associate and move on with your life. I plan to do the same. I am not angry at you, I am merely disappointed. I had believed we were destined to be together forever, but I was evidently mistaken. I loved you more than you loved me, because I would never do anything to hurt you. However, you do not love me the same way, and I am not concerned about the children. I will take care of them because they are my priority, but you have not made them yours. I will ensure that you are kept informed about their progress. I have been in frequent communication with you regarding their progress. I have invested the majority of our financial resources into establishing a new life, necessitating your employment. I have transferred ownership of the residence to you, providing sufficient capital for the purchase of a modest apartment in a desirable location. Additionally, it may be advisable for you to terminate your employment. I contacted PALS because our relationship would likely have persisted had they not intervened. I implore you to consider the evidence. James and I had just concluded packing my belongings and were preparing to depart when my phone indicated a new message. Linda's text had arrived. My heart raced. Had she grasped the gravity of her actions and sought reconciliation with God? I hope so. If she was not enjoying her relationship with him, our marriage might still have a chance. I opened the message, and my heart sank. It was a message from __. Hello Cookie, it began. I just spent time with your wife, and she was fine. See attachment. My hands were trembling as I discovered Linda's infidelity. Tommy and Gail came over and embraced me as I sat in my office, visibly shocked. Don't cry, Daddy. We still love you, they said. I sent them to the family room before sending an SMS attachment to everyone I had previously informed. Once I had recovered sufficiently, I researched flights to Charleston. One was departing in 4 hours, so I reserved 3 seats in first class and we were on our way. The airport was an hour and a half away, and the children fell asleep almost immediately. At least I appreciated that I had parked in the long-term lot. I utilized the term parking area and subsequently utilized the shuttle to reach our flight. I deposited my vehicle keys at the front desk for my superior to retrieve at a later point in time. It was a company automobile. I left a message on the corporate answering machine because I was reluctant to cause further distress to my superior when we reached our seats. The children promptly fell asleep. I remained at my seat, contemplating potential actions that could have been taken to avert this unfortunate series of events. I came to the realization that this type of occurrence was, in all likelihood, unavoidable. Given Linda's apparent willingness to engage in an extramarital relationship, I began to suspect that this might not be the first such incident. I even wondered whether the children were truly mine. I contacted my uncle, who reassured me that someone would be waiting for us at the entrance. However, a disturbing thought suddenly occurred to me, prompting me to search for Mark's contact information on his Facebook profile. I found it and sent him a message, expressing my gratitude for providing indisputable evidence of my soon-to-be ex-wife's infidelity. I would like to express my gratitude for accepting my wife into your home. I have spent years with her, unaware of her true nature. If we meet again, I would like to shake your hand and buy you a beer. Thank you very much. James, I resent my message and smiled. Undoubtedly, he would be enraged. I was also certain he would show it to Linda, causing her blood vessels to rupture. I reclined in my seat and fell asleep. I awoke to the flight attendant instructing me to fasten my seatbelt. We were about to land. I checked that the younger passengers were already fastened in their seats. I had received a sufficient night's sleep on the flight and felt refreshed and ready to face an unknown future. We disembarked from the plane, passed through passport control, and proceeded to the arrivals area to receive our luggage as we emerged. Upon emerging from the arrivals tunnel, I observed a man attired in chauffeur's livery bearing a banner inscribed with my name. We proceeded to introduce ourselves, after which he directed us to the vehicle and placed our baggage in the rear seat. He then introduced himself as Paul and inquired as to our appetite, given the 2-hour journey. The 2-hour drive to my uncle's castle revealed that I was hungry, as were the children. Paul, who appeared to have children of his own, took us to McDonald's, much to the kids' delight. Linda and I awoke to sunlight streaming through the window and initially wondered where we were. The atmosphere felt peculiar, and looking at the men resting next to me brought back memories of the entire night. Mark was lying next to me, and I recalled that night with fondness. I looked at the time, 10, the time was 30 a.m. It was time to return home. I was astonished to recall my departure from the gym the previous night, but Dee indicated that he would pardon me in a few days. After all, Dave had forgiven Dee for losing his way. It seemed that I needed to grant Dave permission to do the same thing to achieve equilibrium. I was prepared. To do the same, I still loved Jim and wanted to spend the rest of my life with him. However, he needed to accept that it was only a one-time affair and move on. I showered, dressed, and headed downstairs. Mark had prepared breakfast for us, waffles, bacon, and coffee. We ate in near silence. After finishing our coffee, I informed him that I needed to leave for home, as we were departing the residence. As we were leaving, I observed a gathering at his gate, as well as at least 2 television cameras. The individuals present were shouting various statements, including, "Mark, this is your new girlfriend, you knew she was married, you always pursue married ladies, Linda, does your husband approve of you spending the night with Mark? This is the first time you have cheated on your husband, are you planning to go out with Mark again?" I was taken aback by the intensity of the situation. How did they learn my name? How might this affect my marriage? The incident occurred today, and the police were present. They confirmed that we had successfully completed our escape route. Mark seemed surprised and inquired if I had informed anyone of our whereabouts. I confirmed that I had not, and I was uncertain how the police had been able to ascertain our location. Upon reaching my residence, we encountered additional reporters, but there were no police officers present to facilitate our departure. Microphones were placed in our faces, and we were repeatedly asked the same questions. My neighbors observed the entire event, and Mark's actions, specifically his physical contact with me, did not contribute to a positive outcome. I proceeded to enter my residence and closed the door behind me. Despite the fact that several reporters were still stationed outside the residence, peering through the windows. I then proceeded to move around the house, taking the initiative to close all of the drapes and shutters. In my mind, I reflected on how this situation was not what I had envisioned. I had anticipated a more pleasant evening. However, when Jim expressed his discontent and I took the opportunity to nurture his wounded ego, I was hopeful that he would eventually forgive me. I proceeded to traverse the domicile, noting Jim's absence. While I was gratified by this development, as it afforded me the opportunity to tidy up and change my attire, thereby avoiding Jim's observation of my disarray, I was simultaneously perplexed by his whereabouts. I consulted the bedside clock and observed that it was nearly 1 a.m. It was 12 a.m., but I had not considered the children and was consequently late in taking them up. I gazed outside the windows and observed that it seemed as though all the reporters had grown tired of waiting for me to emerge and had left. I then proceeded to drive up to the Goodson residence and knocked on the door. Ron opened the door in a normal manner. I would have simply strolled in, but he nearly slammed the door in my face. "Ron, what do you want?" I inquired, feeling somewhat discouraged by the tone of his voice. "I'm here to pick up my children," I continued, "and I apologize for being late." "Have you forgotten about your children in your pursuit of a relationship with that ___ football player? It is unfortunate that you have allowed your priorities to become misaligned. Priorities are misaligned. I implore you to reconsider your actions. Even if I were privy to their whereabouts, I would not divulge that information." He abruptly closed the door, leaving me momentarily stunned that my endeavor had already gone public. I returned home and attempted to process the situation, only to notice my laptop on the table between Jim's engagement ring and 3 envelopes. Upon reading Jim's message, I selected the top one addressed solely to Linda. My eyes clouded over, and I began crying even harder than when my pet was run over as a baby. I opened my laptop and read the message Mark had sent Jim. I assumed it couldn't get much worse, but when I saw the recording, I had to rush to the restroom and vomit. I was infuriated. I was at a loss as to where they might be and how I could possibly make amends with them if I could not find them. I opened the next packet and discovered a letter from Tommy. His handwriting was uneven and poorly padded, unlike Gail's, which was neat and attractive. The letter read, "Mommy, Daddy is taking us away because you no longer love us. Your departure with another man caused our father to shed tears. Have you ceased to love him? Otherwise, he would not be crying. Our father asserts that you still love us, and thus, we must also love you. However, I am uncertain as to whether you truly loved us and would not have left with another man. Why did you do that? You have caused my father immense pain, and I was enraged. I was angry with you. I love Tommy." Postscript, Gail assisted with the spelling. I set Tommy's note aside and picked up Gail's note. I was afraid to read her note. Note after note, I was reminded of her status as Daddy's little girl. So I opened the letter with trembling fingers. Gail's note read, "Mom, I can't believe what you did to us. You have always taught us that family comes first. One might be forgiven for assuming that such standards would be upheld in the case of a mother-child relationship. However, this does not appear to be the case. The individual in question has previously stated that the aforementioned values should be upheld. However, there is no evidence to suggest that they have done so themselves. Indeed, there is considerable evidence to suggest that they have not. To illustrate this point, one need only consider the following examples. 1. The individual in question left their father for another man. 2. They told their father that they would only dance with him. She lied to and betrayed Daddy. I no longer consider her my mother. My mother would never do such a thing. Since she is no longer my mother, I feel no obligation to love her. If Papa were to read this, he would be very angry with me. He informed me that we should love her like he is convinced she loves us. However, I no longer believe that to be true. Otherwise, you would not have caused the dissolution of our family. I hope to never see you again, and if you do reappear, I will ignore you. I wish you a life of solitude and an eternity in hell. You are the most detestable mother I have ever encountered. Gail, I was sobbing uncontrollably on the floor. I was so overwhelmed with emotion that I did not hear the knock on the door. When it opened, it was my parents. Sam and Sarah were standing there, visibly distressed. My father entered the kitchen, and my mother approached me and guided me back to the couch. I looked up at her, and she struck me with a sharp slap, causing me to lose my balance and fall to the floor. Sarah, you foolish and inconsiderate girl, how dare you show such disrespect to Jim in such a public manner? He is, without a doubt, one of the most admirable men I know, second only to your father. How could you? It was a grave mistake to debase him in such a manner before departing to become the mistress of another man for the night. We had hoped to have instilled in you a more refined sensibility, but if it were not for the children, we would disown you and Sue. However, you are still our daughter, and we will continue to support you. Linda, how did you become aware of the situation? Who informed you? Jim told me he texted and emailed both videos to everyone. I am aware of your actions, and I am compelled to inform you that Jim is a well-known and highly regarded individual. Have you ascertained his current whereabouts? I must admit that I am uncertain. I attempted to contact him via his telephone number, but I was informed that it had been disconnected. My parents also attempted to reach him, but they were unsuccessful. We contacted numerous individuals, but the outcome remained unchanged. Gene had terminated his association with his former life, and no one was able to contact him. Sarah, what has prompted this behavior? Why would you do that to Jim? Mother, it was Mark Lavalier. He approached our table and invited me to dance. He selected me from among all the women in the club, and I accepted his invitation. I could have foreseen this outcome. Dee has been involved in your life since elementary school, providing support and assistance when you were in need. Despite this, you have not learned to reciprocate the support and assistance that Dee has provided. Jim has demonstrated that he is capable of forgiving you when you return home the following morning. This allows you to resume your lives as normal. However, it is unlikely that any man would forgive you for your actions. These statements are unfounded and unsubstantiated. If your mother had done the same, she would have been met with the same response. I would bury them both in the dirt, and you should be grateful that I am not Jim. We did our best. I advise you to remain at home for the time being, in case he returns. Keep your phone nearby. If you require assistance, simply call. It was Jim, but instead it was Dee. Could you please provide me with a detailed account of what transpired last night? I would like to understand the circumstances more fully. Dee, there has been a significant misunderstanding. Jim has departed with the children, and I am uncertain of their destination. Please do not be concerned. He will return, as he loves you. He is merely upset because you hurt his feelings. Tell Andrew everything, but not now. I must repair my marriage. I regret listening to you. I may never see my children again. Do not blame me. You chose to have fun with a football star. You could have said no. Do not blame me. She was correct. I could have said no. I concluded after concluding the telephone conversation, I sat back and awaited Jim's call. Upon our arrival at Jew's castle, we found that we had arrived in time for lunch. Jules was waiting for us when we exited the vehicle. Paul carried the bags to the entrance before exiting the vehicle to park it. I was greeted by Gilles with a typical French hug. Gilles then proceeded to greet the children. Welcome to my home. Please feel free to make yourselves at home. He encouraged us to treat it as our own, noting that we were very welcome and expressing hope for our satisfaction. He then led us into the reception area, which was larger than our home. I spent many happy years here while my father served in the Marines. Throughout our time, servants were in attendance, and Jules introduced us to them. The final servant in line was a strikingly attractive woman of about 25 who Jules claimed was his private secretary and PA in the United States. I found myself wondering how private he was when introducing her to us. The woman, who appeared to be approximately 25 years of age, was introduced to us as Jules' personal assistant, PA, in the United States. This prompted me to question the degree of privacy he exercised when introducing her to us, particularly given that she was referred to as a vet and that he stated she would arrange for anything we needed. Simon, a woman of short stature and advanced age, was the housekeeper. She was responsible for attending to our needs, although the first dinner was accompanied by Jules, who led us to the dining room at the rear of the chateau, which overlooks a spacious patio with a swimming pool. Both Jules and I observed that the children's eyes lit up when they saw the pool. We apologized to the children, informing them that the pool was currently closed for the winter. Their expressions indicated clear disappointment. There is also a smaller indoor pool, which will be discussed later. I had anticipated that the children would be delighted, but they appeared to require my permission before they expressed their enthusiasm. They approached Jules and hugged him, expressing their gratitude. The five of us then proceeded to eat lunch, which included a veterinarian who consumed only a minimal amount of food. In France, lunch typically lasts longer than 2 hours. 2 hours after lunch, the children inquired as to whether they might utilize the pool. I informed them that they lacked the necessary attire and that AET would assist them in procuring the necessary items and ensuring their safety after they departed. Jules and I procured a bottle of his preferred red wine and proceeded to the sunroom, where Jim proceeded to divulge the details of the day's events. I informed him of the situation, and by the conclusion of the conversation, I was in a state of profound distress. I was ashamed as I attempted to conceal my tears and was relieved that the children were not present to witness my emotional turmoil. Jim, the French have a markedly different perspective on infidelity when it involves romantic partners or mistresses. It is viewed as a relatively acceptable practice, but her actions were utterly reprehensible. Even in this society, I have decided what I am going to do with her. I intend to retain her for a period of approximately 2 weeks and then proceed with a divorce. There is nothing I can do about her lover except make him appear to be a dishonorable person. If there is anything I can do, please let me know. You and the children are welcome to stay here as long as you wish. I am sure Simon will enjoy taking care of them. I would be grateful if you could kindly request that IET locate an educational institution with an English-speaking faculty for the children. It would be greatly beneficial for me to ascertain this information before I commence my new role in a month's time. Having a clear understanding of the children's safety and well-being will undoubtedly facilitate my transition. We proceeded to engage in a relaxed yet contemplative conversation over drinks. And contemplating the future, Jules consumed alcohol and a substantial cigar, while Tommy and Gail returned with IET. I experienced no discomfort. Instead, I felt a sense of contentment, an assurance that everything would be well. Tommy and Gail departed to explore the castle, with instructions to return in time for dinner. One of the maids accompanied me to my room. I was accompanied to the 2 adjoining doors of Tommy and Gail's rooms. I had previously visited on numerous occasions, yet I was still astonished by the vast scale of the estate, which was referred to as a chateau but resembled a small palace. Jules was an elderly man, and as the eldest, he had inherited the majority of the property. My mother, on the other hand, had received a generous dowry and should have secured it. Instead, she married my father, a lieutenant in the Royal Marines. They were both killed in a car accident when they were hit by a drunk driver while on their way to visit me in Chateau. I was 18 at the time and about to go to university. After the funeral, I returned to England and joined a regiment of paratroopers. Subsequently, I spent the following 5 years in the military. I placed the inheritance into a trust, as I had no immediate need for the funds. Thus far, I have not accessed the trust. I was employed by one of the largest manufacturers of fluid injection equipment, including fuels, lubricants, and paint. We were a significant supplier to one of the leading German automakers, utilizing our top-of-the-line products. Our products were of the highest quality, and other automakers also used our cheaper products for the same purposes. My new position was that of plant manager for the French operation. The plant was located on 15 acres of land and employed the plant employed approximately 600 individuals. My initial salary was in the vicinity of 7 figures, representing a 60% increase from my previous position. Prior to assuming my official duties, I spent 3 months working alongside the current superintendent, gaining insight into his role. He planned to retire but would remain available for 6 months to address any issues that may arise. I was fortunate that his residence was only an hour's drive from the factory, situated near Paris. This allowed me to utilize the morning and evening rush hours, which were less congested. Additionally, I had a driver assigned to me, ensuring convenient transportation. In my letter, I stated that I would ensure that the children contacted Linda but waited until the following Sunday to do so. I provided them with both a laptop and instructions to contact their mother and inform her of their safety. Tommy indicated that he wished to communicate with Linda first, but Gail refused to do so, stating that she had not considered the children and therefore did not owe Linda any obligation. Despite our efforts to persuade her, she remained reluctant to do so. I sent Linda a text message, urging her to turn on her laptop so that Tommy could contact her. I also reminded him not to reveal our location. I then sent Linda a text message informing her that over a week had passed since Jim had taken the children and left. 2 days later, I had gone to the police to report their disappearance. I was instructed to report them as missing. I was then led into an interrogation room where I was greeted by a female sergeant with a sailor appearance. I informed her that my husband had taken the children and left, and that I was unsure of their whereabouts. She then introduced herself as Sergeant Mary Malone and inquired as to whether we had met previously. I replied in the negative, and the interrogation commenced. I was asked whether I was afraid that my husband might harm the children. I replied in the negative, stating that he loved them more than anything in the world and would never hurt them. I was then asked whether he had left me a note explaining his reasons for leaving. I retrieved a note from my purse and handed it to the sergeant. I extended the document for her perusal and averted my gaze. She perused the note, then I believe reread it, inquired as to whether she could obtain a copy, and I assented. She departed the room for a couple of minutes and then returned, offering me the original note. I am now aware of the context in which I have previously encountered you. You are an inconsequential figure. In a previous episode of the television program Celebrity, you appeared as a guest, discussing your experiences with Mark Levon. It was revealed that you were the married woman with whom he had an affair. I recall feeling a rush of shame and covering my face with my hands. I realize now that your perception of me may be negative, but I assure you that I am not a terrible person. I am unsure of the circumstances that led to this perception. I am at a loss as to how I could have done such a terrible thing to my husband. I must find him and make things right. Could you possibly assist me, Linda? I am not here to pass judgment on you. My sole concern is the well-being of your children. From what you have told me, they are not in any danger, so I am unable to issue an Amber Alert. I must advise you to issue a BOLO indicating that no further action should be taken. I am unaware of whether you or your husband have filed for divorce. I can confirm that I have not filed for divorce, although I am unsure why this is the case. If one spouse is in the process of divorce, the other spouse has the right to retain custody of the children. Otherwise, Jim has this right. Given that Jim has the right to take the children wherever he wishes, I am unable to take any action. The BOLO is the most that can be done in this situation. If Jim contacts you in any way, please inform me so that I can update your file. I was then politely asked to leave the station. I always had my phone and laptop with me, even in the bathroom. I consulted with an attorney who provided a similar assessment as Sergeant Malloy but indicated that if I could locate Jim, she would attempt to obtain a court order compelling Jim to grant me access to my children. I began monitoring the media coverage surrounding Mark Levon and, following the broadcast, received numerous calls from irate individuals. Local residents expressed disapproval of Mark's moral standards, including those of his associates. Many couples who had been victims of similar incidents were interviewed on live television. It was revealed that Mark had a practice of touching married women in front of their spouses. In order to damage their marriages, he would send the spouses proof of the incidents. The majority of his victims divorced, and at least one husband committed suicide. This resulted in a significant increase in calls from the public requesting that Mark be removed from the team. When sponsors began withdrawing their support, Mark was dismissed from professional football. He received a substantial financial settlement as a result of the scandal. However, his wife did not cease her pursuit of justice. The attorney I consulted promptly initiated a class action lawsuit on behalf of all victims, including myself. It was a Sunday, and I had just finished lunch when I received a text message from Jim. I anticipated a lengthy and abusive message but was surprised to find that it was merely I was instructed to switch on my laptop, which was already on, and a FaceTime prompt appeared. I logged in and was overcome with emotion when I saw Tommy's face. I was unable to speak, but managed to say, "Hi, baby." I missed you so much. How are you? I then saw a message from Mommy, who said, I missed you too. Why did you abandon Daddy and make him cry? I responded, oh, darling. I am so sorry. I did that, but this is grown-up stuff. There are some matters I must discuss with your father. Would you kindly put him on the phone? I apologize, but your father does not wish to speak with you. Please ask him to call me shortly. Where are you, my dear child? Tell me where you are so I can come and see you. I truly miss you all. Your father has advised me not to tell you, but we may telephone you every Sunday to speak. Have you done anything interesting today? Let me know about your day. It is quite fascinating here. There is an indoor pool and spacious double bedrooms. We are going shopping tomorrow. Your father is taking me, while a veterinarian is taking Gail. I inhaled sharply. I am curious as to the identity of the veterinary surgeon who is accompanying Gail, who is a veterinarian. She is responsible for ensuring that we have access to the necessary resources and is highly competent. I believe you would find her agreeable. Indeed, I am aware that my father does. I was disconcerted to learn that Jim had been absent for only a week and had already formed a relationship with another woman. I was eager to gain further insight into this situation. While it is undoubtedly a positive development, I am curious as to her physical appearance. She is nearly as tall as my father and wears high heels. She bears a striking resemblance to the women featured in your periodicals. She regales me with bedtime stories and as Gail is teaching me French, and I am enjoying her company. Gail also likes her, they converse for hours about matters pertaining to women. I must take my leave, Gail is calling for me. I love you, and I love you even more. I am sorry, Mommy. I have to go. That was it. The screen faded out. I tried to rejoin the conversation, but they must have terminated the call. I sat there, astonished that my family had been taken by French speakers who were enjoying themselves. I was curious about the type of French that was being taught in my gym class. My mind began to race as I contemplated the implications of witnessing Jim with another woman. I suddenly realized that I must be experiencing a similar emotional state to that which Jim must have been in on the night he was with Mark. I was filled with a sense of overwhelming guilt and remorse, questioning what I had done to my dear Jim. It became clear to me that my actions had caused him immense pain and suffering. I felt like a complete and utter failure. In a state of distress, I contacted the police and requested to speak with Sergeant Malone. I informed her that I had been in communication with Tommy via FaceTime but still had no idea of their whereabouts. She expressed her gratitude for keeping her informed and agreed to maintain the search operation. At that point, the conversation concluded. I then contacted my parents to inform them of the developments. When I told my mother about the call and my concerns about his French, she commented, now that you understand, perhaps when you eventually see Jim, you'll feel more sympathy for him. You'll need to grovel and beg his pardon, but knowing Jim, the opportunity has already passed. Now, tell me what Tommy said and whether he appeared happy. Gail will need some time, but I believe she will eventually come around. On Monday morning, I went to the realtor to sell the house and I was astonished at the property's valuation, given that Jim had managed all the financial aspects. Over the following days, numerous individuals telephoned and posted a "for sale" sign. The subsequent week passed at a slow pace. I waited until Sunday and arose early, preparing breakfast without checking the time. When I looked at the clock, it seemed as if time had ceased and was being dragged out. I proceeded with my activities to pass the time, and suddenly my mobile phone alerted me to a text message. I retrieved my mobile phone from the table, stumbled and dropped it, then picked it up from the floor and opened it. I accessed the message and accepted the FaceTime invitation. It was Tommy once more. Hello, Mommy. I love you and miss you. Hello, baby. I missed you too, exactly like everyone else. Daddy is still unhappy and Gail is still angry at you, but the vet is trying to get her to talk to you again. We had a wonderful time visiting the zoo and seeing all of the animals, even some bears from home. Then Paul picked us up and took us to a really good restaurant where I played pool. It was fantastic. After dinner, we returned to Julie's place, where Gail and I engaged in swimming activities while my father observed us. I was required to retire for the night's rest due to my younger age relative to Gail. However, I was not inconvenienced as my father permitted me to utilize the PlayStation for an additional hour. Jules's mansion is expansive, and Gail and I spent several hours navigating its interior and grounds. I was assigned a school to attend, and our first day is scheduled for tomorrow. I am uncertain if I am prepared to resume my studies, yet my father is adamant that we attend. Could you kindly provide an update on your recent activities and the well-being of your grandparents? We conversed for approximately an hour until Tommy indicated that he had to depart due to time constraints. We then proceeded to conclude our conversation and terminate the call. I proceeded to close my laptop. I was curious about the identity of Paul. I was aware of the name Jews, but I was uncertain about its significance. I was also curious about the nature of IET's search for my child's school. I decided to contact my parents to inform them of my father's continued lack of communication and his apparent polite demeanor. My mother and I conversed for over an hour before she inquired about my familiarity with the individual named Gilles. I mentioned that his name seemed somewhat familiar to me, but I was unable to recall the context. My mother observed that all of the names sounded French, and she noted that Jim was of French descent. This observation led her to hypothesize that there might be a connection between the names. He had relocated the children to France. If that is indeed the case, it is unlikely that I will have the opportunity to see them again. I informed my mother of this, and she concurred. By the time the phone call ended, I was in a state of distress, and I was unable to sleep. The following months were similar in nature. I spoke with Tommy, but Gail and Jim still refused to communicate with me. Tommy informed me that he and Gail were enjoying their new school and were getting along well. Then, on Wednesday of the following week, there was a knock at the door. I peered through the crowd to see a man in a gray suit standing there. I answered the door and he inquired as to the purpose of his visit. He believed himself to be a salesman. "Are you Mrs. Linda Carlisle?" he asked. "Yes," I replied. "What can I do for you, Mrs. Carlisle?" he continued. "You've been served." He then handed me a large manila envelope. I remained there, unsure of what to do. I went inside and opened the package. Inside was a petition for Mr. J. Carlisle's divorce from Mrs. L. Carlisle, along with a letter from Jim's attorney, Miss Jane Wright. The letter requested that I contact her. I called my mother for advice. She suggested that I hire a lawyer to review the divorce paperwork. The following day, I went to visit. The lawyer advised me to sign the documents, citing their favorable terms. If I am correct, Jim resides in France, where challenging the divorce would be costly, even if the judge ordered counseling. There is no means to enforce it. I departed with a sense of helplessness, uncertain of their whereabouts. I then realized that this was precisely how Jim felt that night. I wept so profusely that I had to pull over to the side of the road, unable to see where I was going and terrified of an accident. On the following Saturday, circumstances underwent a significant transformation. My mother telephoned me, expressing great enthusiasm. I had conversed with Jim and the children, during which Jim articulated a desire for the children to spend time with their grandparents. "This is a commendable arrangement, Mother. I am gratified for you. I was aware that Jim would not exclude you from their lives. He is aware of the profound affection they hold for you, and you for them. What did they convey to you?" Jim and Tommy appeared markedly more content 2 months ago, following their discussion with Linda. Consequently, I resolved to make this a regular occurrence. I was concerned about Gail's refusal to communicate with her mother. However, I was hopeful that she would reconsider, as both the children and I required a change of wardrobe. Consequently, I inquired as to the most suitable stores. She promptly stated that she would accompany us, as men often lack the knowledge required to purchase suitable items for children, particularly for girls of Gail's age. Gail did not object and proceeded to request time off from JWS, who granted her request. Additionally, he informed me that he had also advised Jim to accompany Gail on shopping trips. When a woman agrees to accompany you shopping, it is advisable to refrain from argument. Instead, it is more beneficial to follow her guidance, as this may result in a more positive outcome. Consequently, the following morning, we proceeded to embark on our shopping trip. AET was aware of the situation. All the most suitable establishments were visited, and since financial constraints were not an issue, it became apparent that we could not take everything. IET and Gail displayed a close affinity when we entered lingerie boutiques, running their fingers over the silky products, glancing at our flushed faces, and laughing. IET recommended an unassuming, secluded cafe where we ate lunch. IET ordered espresso and was taken aback when I did the same. Tommy and Gail exchanged glances and ordered brownies, which were exquisite. We remained there all day and did not return. It was not feasible to forego the evening repast until after dinner, as the cook, Marie, would have been displeased. Our shopping had advanced more rapidly than anticipated, and after the evening meal, IET and Gail proceeded to Gail's room to model the various items. Jules, Tommy, and I were obliged to remain in attendance and provide responses that were both appropriate and engaging. The following day, Gail paraded in her new ensembles. A veterinarian accompanied me to register the children for school. I inquired about the potential for Tommy and Gail to succeed in French. The veterinarian simply smiled and stated that she would take me to an embassy school for children from English-speaking countries. In the countries where we were speaking, we spent more than 2 hours registering the children in school. They insisted on contacting their previous educational institutions to inquire about their academic standing. I was pleased that they could attend the same school and see each other between courses. However, I was concerned that if they contacted their previous schools, it might have a negative impact on their current academic performance. Tommy and Gail were scheduled to commence their studies the following Monday. I reasoned that we had earned a day off before the children began their classes, so I returned to work. I inquired as to whether they would like to visit the zoo. They were visibly delighted and expressed a desire to see a veterinarian. When I asked, she simply smiled and replied in the affirmative. We had a wonderful day at the zoo and left with the typical stuffed animals. Tommy spoke with his mother the following Sunday, but Gail was adamant that she would never speak to that woman again. On the first day of school, Paul agreed to take them until further arrangements could be made. The children were visibly excited that evening and eager to share their experiences. Both appeared to enjoy their school day. Tommy sat next to the son of a U.S. Embassy officer, and the two engaged in lively conversation. Gail sat next to an English girl whose father worked in the British Embassy security detail, and the two quickly formed a rapport. Gail approached me and inquired if she could contact her grandparents, whom she missed. I was ashamed of myself for not having considered this myself. If anyone could bridge the gap between Gail and Linda, it was Sarah. I elected to await the children's acclimation to their academic pursuits before contacting Linda's parents. The subsequent 2 months unfolded without incident at the educational institution, and I became proficient in my new role with the assistance of my predecessor. I was now overseeing the factory operations independently, with only occasional assistance. I observed that the veterinarian and the children had developed a profound bond, and I contemplated whether this was a beneficial or detrimental development. I opted to consult with Jules because he was more intimately acquainted with her than I was. When the children retired for the night and the veterinarian returned to her residence at the rear of the castle, I inquired of Joel regarding her. He replied, she was 30 years old, yet appeared much younger, perhaps around 25. She was the daughter of a friend who had taken her under his wing following the death of her mother, who had abandoned them when she was young. The friend had no memory of her. She rarely went on dates after her previous boyfriend left her at the altar, according to the friend. The friend was focused on her work and claimed that she had taken more time off in the last 2 months than she had in the entire time he had known her. He also mentioned that he thought she liked me. She had certainly grown in love with the children and would be devastated. If I were to remove them from the situation, I would be doing so prematurely, as it would be inadvisable to consider romantic attachments at this early stage. My focus should be on my children and my new work. He expressed confidence that she would wait, and in the interim, he and the children were forming a bond despite their mother's absence. IET would serve to fill the void. I ultimately decided to maintain the status quo and continue residing at the chateau, as the children enjoyed it there, and Jewel was amenable to the idea of children in his home. I felt it was time for the children to contact their grandparents, so I contacted Sarah. The phone rang numerous times, and I was on the verge of hanging up. I arose from slumber to the sound of a voice stating, "Jim, is it truly you?" "Hello, Sarah. I considered it an opportune moment for you to see your grandchildren. If that is agreeable, I am gratified that you called. Linda resides on Sundays and communicates with Tommy. She is disconcerted because Gail is disinclined to speak with her. Sarah, IET, and I have endeavored to persuade her to converse. to her mother, but she is unresponsive to the suggestion. Instead, contact Linda, who is a reliable source of information. I had hoped that you could persuade Linda to intervene. Jim, who is a veteran, have you assumed Linda's role? No, there has been no replacement. She works as my Uncle Jules's assistant and has been a source of guidance and support. She accompanied us on shopping trips and acted as a sister. In addition to assisting the children with their personal care, she also helped them choose appropriate attire for school. She is not attempting to replace Linda, rather, she is providing support to the children in adjusting to their new circumstances. I am uncertain as to how I would manage without her. If you would be so kind, I will have the children call you via FaceTime on Saturday morning. I will call first, and if Linda is present, they will call later. Jim, that is an excellent idea. I am looking forward to it. Jim, I ask that you forgive her. She is aware of her actions and has expressed remorse. If you speak with her, you may be able to resolve the matter. If not for the sake of the children, then at the very least one must consider the implications of her actions. There is no chance of reconciliation with her, and thus no possibility of a future together. Her actions were unforgivable, and I am not prepared to live in a state of forgiveness. I cannot accept a future in which I am perceived as a lesser man, and thus I will not forgive her. There is no turning back, only forward. I will attempt to coordinate a visit from you, Sam, and Linda, but this is all I can do. Sam indicated that you would express a similar sentiment, and he concurs with your viewpoint. However, I felt compelled to try. I anticipate our discussion on Saturday, and I know Sam also wishes to converse with you. I will conclude this communication for the time being and encourage you to extend greetings to the children. The appointed Saturday arrived, and the children were visibly excited. Tommy proceeded first, and Gail engaged in conversation with Grandma for nearly an hour. After approximately half an hour, I took my leave, as there was no further benefit in remaining. Sarah would have reached the same conclusion by then, namely, that France constituted our new residence. Subsequently, Sam requested a discussion with me, and I sent the children to engage in play. Jim, I extend my sincerest apologies for the events that transpired. I hope you are aware that we have not sunk to the level of the individual in question. It appears that he has made a misstep. It has become a pattern for him to woo wives from under their husbands' noses and then engage in telephone conversations with them. On this occasion, he did not assault the husband, rather, he abused you. As a result of your decision to send everything to this TV show, the ___ reached a boiling point, and over a dozen additional couples came forward. One astute lawyer filed a class action lawsuit against the villages, but when the sponsor began withdrawing its support, the team dismissed him. I will provide you with the relevant details and the attorney's contact information, as you may wish to join that class action. We spoke at length about the matter. After a brief interval, I terminated the call. I then reviewed his statements and promptly consulted with my legal counsel, who advised me to pursue the matter further. While I was not motivated by financial gain, I was determined to pursue the matter for the next 2 months. As tensions eased, Gail remained reluctant to communicate with this woman, whom she referred to as her mother. Even Sarah, who had initially attempted to persuade Gail, eventually gave up. As the situation intensified, I was compelled to reinforce my boss's confidence in me. During our last conversation, he had indicated that he was. I was quite satisfied with how I handled the running of the factory. Production was increasing, sick days were down, and the union was expressing positive sentiments about me. This was because I implemented numerous adjustments, abandoned the French management style, and was seen in the shop soliciting employee feedback and acting on it as needed. I also extended their vacation time in accordance with their American colleagues. This had a beneficial effect on employees, who were more satisfied and believed that management valued them on an individual basis. AET and I developed a close relationship. She frequently visited our workplace at the castle and spent the majority of her weekends with us, either shopping or planning our social calendars. When I was away on business, she cared for my family. She served as their primary caregiver, and they reciprocated. One Friday night, we sat as a family watching Frozen for the millionth time with Tommy snuggling up to Betty. He now referred to her as Mommy. When the movie ended and it was time to go to bed, she looked over at Tommy, who was already asleep. I removed him from her lap and, as I was preparing to leave, he opened his eyes, said good night to me, and fell back asleep. We all remained motionless, observing the unexpected turn of events. Gail simply stood there, smiling, before leaning over to Eddie and kissing her, saying good night to her. She laughed and proceeded to her room. I observed the veterinarian, who was visibly distraught. I expressed my sincerest apologies to Jim, reiterating that I had not intended for this to occur. She kissed my cheek and departed. I remained stationary, my mouth agape, uncertain of how to respond. Jill cast a glance in my direction and uttered a single word, now. I have long held the suspicion that this was the case. Please share the relevant information. He also left me standing there, seemingly at a loss for words. I carried Tommy to bed and returned to my room, experiencing a warm, pink sensation in my gut that I had not felt in years. Linda, I was relieved that the children were engaging with my parents. Despite Gail's refusal to speak to me, my mother would tell me everything she said. I felt as if I was conversing with Gail in the third person. Tommy was always aware of what they said and did. I still did not like the effect it had on. I was relieved that she was attempting to persuade Gail to talk to me. I had been unaware of their residence until that point. I informed Sergeant Malone of the situation and she advised me to contact my lawyer. I scheduled an appointment with him the following day and he informed me that because Jim had dual citizenship, the French authorities would consider the children to be partially French and would oppose extradition. I was back to square one. Over the next few months, however, everything improved. I sold the house and purchased a wonderful 2-bedroom starter home in a gated community, even after taxes and commissions. I purchased a 2-bedroom starter home in a gated community, even after taxes and commissions. After all transactions were complete, I had in excess of $100,000. I had no financial concerns in the near future, so I began to seek employment as Jim had suggested. I discovered that I would need to qualify for a suitable position to earn a good income, so I returned to school. I disregarded the other instructions Jim had given me, so it was surprising that when I went to the doctor about burning when urinating, I was diagnosed with late syphilis and prescribed treatment. I was incensed and would have killed Mark for disclosing my medical condition to the Centers for Disease Control. I was obliged to complete a questionnaire listing all of my sexual partners. However, there was only one name on the questionnaire, and I hoped that the CDC would require Mark to disclose all of his partners anyway. I returned to school and decided to pursue a 2-year degree. I undertook a 1-year night school program in business management, in addition to a full-time 1-year course in catering. I had always been adept at cooking, and I aspired to be self-sufficient through employment in the hospitality industry. I accepted a part-time position as a hostess at a conference center, which would facilitate my long-term goals. I was informed by Sarah that Linda had relocated, secured employment, and was once again living as a single woman. However, she was not yet dating. I was told that she remained available in case I changed my mind. I advised her not to hold her breath. She responded with a chuckle, indicating that a woman could do it if she wanted to. The weekly phone calls proceeded smoothly, and everyone expressed satisfaction with the arrangement. However, Linda was still attempting to communicate with me and Gail, but appeared to lack comprehension of the situation. Tensions escalated at the castle following the summoning of a veterinary professional and the subsequent absence of the mother. Gail elected to attempt the situation to ascertain the outcome. The academic semester was nearing its conclusion, and the institution had organized a series of educational excursions, ranging from overnight to week-long. Tommy expressed a desire to visit the beaches of Normandy, indicating an emerging interest in history. Gail planned to embark on a 2-week river cruise through Germany and Austria. A river cruise to Germany on the Danube, during which she developed an interest in architecture. IET indicated that it would be beneficial for them and allow them to gain new perspectives, and I concurred on the condition that they contact me daily. Gail embarked first, then Tommy followed a week later. When IET and I were returning home, the chateau appeared to represent our entire residence. She informed me that she had prepared dinner for the two of us. As we exited the vehicle, she extended an invitation, specifying that I should dress comfortably and not be late. I was uncertain about what to anticipate, as I had never visited her apartment and was apprehensive. I arrived 5 minutes ahead of schedule and was permitted entry. She removed my jacket and stored it in the closet before guiding me into the living room. The centerpiece of the room was a round table draped in as she greeted me and led me to the couch, informing me that dinner would be ready soon but instructing me not to enter the kitchen. The aroma emanating from the kitchen was overwhelming, yet I was uncertain about its source. She soon returned to the room with a basket of freshly baked scones, biscuits for American readers, and a carafe of red wine. I inquired about the nature of the cooking, to which she replied. She informed me that the recipe was a closely guarded secret and promptly excused herself to the kitchen, instructing me to remain seated and pour the wine. She soon reappeared from the kitchen, bearing 2 plates, each containing 2 pieces of filet mignon stacked on round slices of sourdough bread. These were garnished with sautéed mushrooms and slices of black truffle, accompanied by vegetables in a rich sauce. I was not aware of the dish's name until later, when we were engaged in conversation and I inquired about it. The dish was named Tornadoes Rossini, in honor of the composer. After taking a test bite, I observed that the beef melted in my mouth, bursting with flavor. It was akin to a dam in a flood. I had never tasted anything like it before and was curious as to how a mere mortal could create such a dish. It's expression indicated her delight at my reaction. However, she did not inquire about my approval. She stated that her approval was irrelevant and that this was food for the gods, not humans. It then proceeded to inquire about my culinary training. She regarded me with a look of disdain and stated that my question had been answered. She then proceeded to explain that the wine was an ideal accompaniment to the meal, citing a light red Bordeaux with a chocolate mousse for sweetness, followed by black freshly ground coffee. It then removed the dish from the table and I helped her wash the dishes. She informed me that the French never offered to assist with the cleaning, which was a welcome change of pace, and she kissed me on the cheek. We then sat and drank a glass of fine brandy each. We each consumed a glass of fine brandy, after which it was time to take our leave. We parted ways and she closed the door behind us. I did not return to my room. I was in a state of blissful contentment. I am unsure how long I slept after I realized I was not alone. It was situated next to me at the end of the next day. When we met for breakfast, I was at a loss for words. When she looked at me and smiled, I instantly tensed up and was unable to leave the table to get my coffee. I became aware of her actions and was preparing my coffee when Wes arrived. Wes, it has been apparent for some time that there is a developing relationship between you and her. It is evident to everyone except you. It is imperative that you address this before the children return. Gail will be pleased, but I am uncertain about Tommy's reaction. I typically accomplish tasks on my commute, but not this morning. I was still in a day's work mode. My colleagues observed my distracted demeanor and elevated mood. I overheard several individuals remarking that I seemed in love. I attempted to concentrate and complete my tasks, but I was continually reminded of the previous night's events. It was evident that the staff at the chateau had become aware of my situation. When I arrived home, I was greeted with a multitude of smiles. It was clear that the staff had learned of my personal news, and I felt a surge of embarrassment. My plan was proceeding as anticipated. I was acclimating to my new residence, excelling in my studies, deriving enjoyment from my part-time occupation, and grappling with the ramifications of my misjudgment. I had initiated proceedings for a divorce and would shortly be a free woman. I would have preferred to remain married to Jim, but I had come to recognize that this was no longer feasible. I was hopeful that Jim would permit me to maintain communication with our children. I was compelled to convey my sincerest apologies. My counselor, Jim, and the children all agreed that I needed a fresh start. I repeatedly requested that my mother persuade Jim to speak with me, but she was unsuccessful. Despite this, I was told that everything was going well. However, this was not the case. Mark and a few of his teammates attended one of the events held at the center where I was employed as a hostess. It was a charity event, and Mark was attempting to reconnect with people after being portrayed in a negative light. He was no longer playing in the major leagues. Despite no longer playing in the NFL, he was still engaged with a relatively minor team. He was a prominent figure within the context of the team, and was attempting to reposition himself as a positive figure by participating in charity events and making significant financial contributions. In recent months, he lost his position on a major league team, was involved in a class action lawsuit, and lost half of his considerable wealth. This was his attempt at a comeback. The press reported that he had undergone counseling as a condition. Following his return to professional football, rumors emerged that he had resumed his previous lifestyle of causing harm to others. The press closely monitored his activities, attempting to catch him out. I attempted to avoid contact with him, but with a large belt around my body bearing the words, "What I can do to help," I was unable to do so effectively. He noticed me and approached. We had met previously, although I could not recall where. I am unsure if I can be of assistance. However, I believe I may know you. I will recall where I have seen you before. He walked away looking over his shoulder. One of the other hostesses, a woman I had confided in, approached me. I did not divulge the full extent of my situation. I only stated that I had been unfaithful to my husband and spent the night with another man. Could this be Mark Lavalier? I was speaking with him earlier. He is quite handsome, so much so that he could conceivably place his shoes under my bed at any moment. I am aware that you are married, so I advise you not to entertain such thoughts. He is the individual who procured a divorce for me, and he is not worth the effort. I did not know that at the time, but it was worth it. He is as large as they say, and he can likely sustain erections for an extended period of time. He is selfish, however, and does not care about you. He is only concerned with his own gratification. In my opinion, he was not as skilled as my husband, and the experience was not as satisfying. Despite the celebrity status and the excitement of the night, I regretted it more than I could express. As a result, I found myself alone and isolated. I advise you to heed my experience and avoid a similar fate. Subsequently, Mark approached me with an assertive demeanor. I recalled how I recognized him as the man I had entertained. As we departed from my mansion, the media was already present. My former husband was fortunate to have you as his ex-wife. My husband and I live abroad with our 2 children. I am not inclined to believe that you were ever truly reformed. Given the opportunity, you would have seduced me again, despite my status as a married woman. It is not as enjoyable to seduce single women, but it is still possible to make their boyfriends jealous. Since you are now single, you are an easy target. I am not interested in pursuing a relationship with you. I responded to his inquiry but then directed my attention to one of the guards, indicating that he should approach. Are you in some kind of trouble, Linda? I inquired. I had a brief affair with this man almost a year ago, and now he refuses to accept a refusal. Mark appeared to be on the verge of an outburst. Do you know who I am and what I can do to you in your career? I continued. I know exactly who and what you are, and I am asking you to leave the premises. If you persist in seeking this lady's attention, I will throw you out myself. Mark surveyed me from head to toe and displayed a hint of a smile. You're not particularly imposing, he remarked. The guard's gesture was sufficient to cause injury, yet Mark was unable to respond before the guard had already initiated a physical altercation. The guard's actions were swift and decisive, utilizing a combination of strength and precision to subdue Mark. Despite the evident pain, Mark did not resist, perhaps due to the imminent threat of arrest for harassment. The guard then escorted Mark to his desk, where he instructed him to sit in a chair. Further disturbances arose, prompting me to contact the security guard, who agreed to keep an eye on the situation. He then resumed his post. It was reassuring to witness an individual upholding the principles of honesty and responsibility in the execution of his duties, rather than succumbing to the influence of Mark's supporters. The remainder of the evening proceeded without incident, and I proceeded to return home, where I found the house to be unoccupied. I retired for the night, reflecting on the demise of my romantic relationship. Despite my efforts, I did not encounter Mark at any of the events held at the convention center. However, I did have the opportunity to interact with the security guard once more. We exchanged greetings in the form of a nod and a wave of the hand, and then proceeded to part ways. I continued to believe that if only I could speak with Jim, I could rekindle our relationship. That night, the same scenario repeated itself twice more before the children returned from their vacations. I proceeded to pick up the children from school, and they returned within an hour of each other. Tommy was the first to approach me and say, "Mommy, I missed you so much." He proceeded to recount every detail of his vacation. At the end, he snuggled up to me and fell asleep. Gail, being older and more perceptive, seemed to appreciate the gesture. In comparison to her peers, her level of affection was less pronounced. I received a hug and a kiss on the cheek, and Yvette received the same, with the addition of, "I missed you, Mom," as we drove home. She was visibly emotional, and I was unable to speak. A pattern had emerged, and both children were now freely referring to IET as Mommy. However, when they spoke with their biological mother and grandparents, they preferred to refer to her as "It Thanksgiving," which is not a celebrated holiday outside the United States. As the holiday approached, the embassy hosted a celebration for its personnel. A community leader was invited and arranged for our attendance. Entertainment and a balloon pool for children were provided. I was not concerned about the children's safety when I was alone because Marines were stationed throughout the area. Tommy and Gail had their cell phones with them and could reach us at any time. Jules conversed with the other visitors while Iet and I danced the night away. Everyone had a wonderful time. I had a most enjoyable time. I came to understand that I had fallen in love with Iet, but I was unsure of how to proceed. Christmas was only a few weeks away, and I had devised a plan to surprise the children and Iet. After the children had finished talking with their grandparents, I led them out of the room and spent the next half hour planning the surprise. I informed Iet about one of the surprises, and she felt it was a fantastic idea. We took the children to the Christmas store and told them to buy gifts. The children were delighted to receive gifts from their grandparents, which they could open on Christmas Eve via FaceTime and then send on their way. On the appointed day, the children were visibly excited, as were children around the globe. Despite the late hour, Gail inquired about the presence of additional guests. I informed her that we had invited special visitors and that they would arrive shortly. At that moment, the sound of a vehicle arriving in the pristine snow reached our ears. I proceeded to greet the guests and usher them into the castle through the dining room. The guests were greeted and led into the castle through the dining room. The children expressed their excitement by yelling, "Grandma" and "Grandpa," and racing to their grandparents. After everyone, including Jewel and Iet, had wiped away their tears and engaged in proper introductions, the maid informed us that the cook was ready to serve and invited us to sit at the table. The supper was a resounding success, and we all retreated to the living room. The children sat with their grandparents and clung to them. As it was evident that Tommy was falling asleep, I informed him that it was time for bed. He rose from his grandmother's lap, said good night, and kissed her as he moved up to Iet. He kissed her and said good night. There was stillness in the room. Sam raised his eyebrows, and Sarah covered her lips with a palm. I informed Aet and Juz of the situation later, before leaving to put Tommy to bed. When I returned, Aet and Juz had made a strategic withdrawal, abandoning Gail, my former in-laws. Laws and I were the only ones remaining in the room. Sam regarded me with a look that seemed to say, "I know you're upset," and simply replied, "Well." I was attempting to compose myself, but Gail was quick to interject. "It's not Dad's fault," she said. "Tommy and I chose to call the vet mom approximately 3 months ago, and she has been acting as our mother since we arrived." Gail elaborated, "She planned our education, chose the appropriate clothing for us, and listened to us when we were upset. She tried her hardest to be a good mother. It was the most challenging for me to engage in conversation with the woman who had caused the dissolution of our family unit. However, she consistently demonstrated a lack of tolerance for disrespect. I am aware that she developed an affection for her father at an early age, yet she did not act upon it until after the divorce. Presently, they are in a romantic relationship, and I anticipate that her father will propose marriage at any moment, which will result in her becoming our foster mother. She exhibits a profound affection for us, and we reciprocate that love. Tommy continues to hold a deep affection for his mother. I intend to inquire with the relevant authorities as to whether I may be adopted by Iet, should I reach the age of 18. This woman has never granted her permission for such a thing to occur. This will not affect the relationship between us. I shall never cease to love you both. I ask that you do not be angry with my father. He wished for Tommy and me to maintain contact with our mother. However, given her treatment of us, I refused. Given his tender age, Tommy is not yet equipped to grasp the gravity of her actions. While our father endeavored to shield him from the brunt of the situation, it is inevitable that he will eventually discern the truth about her deceitfulness. The question then becomes, what will be his response? It is difficult to predict. It is noteworthy that Sam and Sarah, like me, viewed Gail with a newfound admiration. Her eloquence and maturity, despite her youthful age of 14, left a profound impression on them. 1 year the woman was quite advanced in age. It then occurred to me that if she were to pursue a career in law, she would be an excellent attorney. I was so proud of her that I shed a tear. Linda's parents also grieved. Gail hugged her grandparents, told them she loved them, and then went to bed. Sam and Sarah glanced at me, waiting for me to respond. I believe Gail adequately conveyed the situation, and I cannot add anything further. Gail only brought up one thing that is important. I will pose the question tomorrow, when we commence the distribution of gifts. Sarah wept, burying her head in her arms. Sam embraced her, stating, "We are not surprised." I informed Sarah that we would likely be unable to persuade her to alter her decision. I do not blame her, but I am uncertain how Linda will react when we inform her that you are getting married. She had hoped that we could persuade you to speak with her. She offers her sincerest apologies. Furthermore, she acknowledges that her actions were unacceptable. However, she is eager to repair the relationship between you two. I must inform her that the situation is dire and that you have moved on. Is it possible for you to tell her in person that the relationship is over? I assume you mean a face-to-face conversation because, if I return to the United States, I will be arrested for taking the children. Therefore, I am not prepared for it. I am willing to speak with her on FaceTime, but only after you return home and support her. Is this sufficient? I understand your reluctance and see no alternative, so I will do this. What about the children who can physically see their mother? I will speak with a lawyer and see what I can do. I do not want to keep Linda from them, but she is to blame for their inability to be with her. I lost my wife. I swore I would not lose my children either. I am willing to speak with her on FaceTime, but only after you return home and provide her with support. That is all I am willing to do. Is this sufficient? I understand your reluctance and see no alternative, so this needs to be done. What about the youngsters who can physically see their mother? I will speak with a lawyer and see what I can do. I do not want to keep Linda from them, but she is to blame for their inability to be with her. I lost my wife. I swore I would not lose my children either. Once they reach the age of majority, which is 16, they have the option of returning to their mother if they so desire. I will not impede their decision. I do not hold high expectations for Gail, but I believe that Tommy is a different case. He misses his mother, which may explain his strong attachment to the veterinary practice. When you return, you should make your plans, and I will do my best to facilitate them. This is the most I can offer. Jim, that is a fair proposal, and more than we anticipated. Linda was misguided if she expected. Despite the evident fatigue and exhaustion that Sam and Sarah exhibited shortly after arriving home, they proceeded to claim that the journey had been lengthy and that they were in need of rest. The following morning, the family gathered for breakfast, during which the children displayed great excitement as they unwrapped their presents. As each package was opened, the customary sounds of oozing and chewing could be heard. In contrast, the adults opened their gifts with a greater sense of decorum. After all gifts had been unwrapped and alcohol consumed, I stood and announced that I had one more surprise. I reached beneath the Christmas tree and presented It with a small wrapped gift. She accepted it with a bewildered expression and began opening it. When the jewelry box appeared, she began to tear the paper with great haste, as if her life depended upon it. She finally opened the box. The jewelry box contained a ring with 3 diamonds, which It observed with tears in her eyes. I informed her that I had only known her for a brief period but had developed feelings of affection and attachment. I hoped that she reciprocated these sentiments. I requested that she accept my proposal and become my wife. She embraced me, expressing her consent with enthusiastic affirmations. I placed the ring on her finger and experienced a profound sense of joy. She proceeded to display the ring to the group, including my former partner. In conclusion, it can be stated that the couple's legal counsel was pleased to hear this. Tommy embraced her and inquired if he could refer to her as Mom at all times. It then turned to Sam and Sarah, who nodded with enthusiasm and stated that they would be honored to have 2 such wonderful children call her Mom from then on. However, they reminded her that she should not forget about her other mother. Who adores you? I inquired of Gail, who was gesturing with each fist bump, affirmatively. Sam and Sarah were holding hands and weeping quietly. I was hopeful, yet uncertain. A Christmas Day dinner consists of a turkey, cooked to perfection with all the trimmings. The 6-course meal that had been served on the previous Christmas Day was not representative of the traditional Christmas dinner in other countries. In France, for example, the main holiday supper takes place on Christmas Eve. It is customary to serve a variety of courses, accompanied by different wines. By the end of the evening, guests are often inebriated to the point of staggering home. In the days leading up to New Year's Eve, Sam and Sarah flew back to their respective countries. I was anticipating seeing Linda, my former wife, who had been divorced from me for several months. I hoped that she would have accepted the dissolution of our marriage and would not cause a scene when upon returning from work that afternoon, Gail and Tommy were waiting for me. Gail then proceeded to inform me of their intention to initiate a conversation regarding a matter of great importance. The imminent disclosure was to be a four-word statement: "Dad, we need to talk." The gravity of the situation was such that I nearly fell from my chair. The imminent disclosure was to be a four-word statement: "Dad, we need to talk." The imminent disclosure was to be a four-word statement: "Dad, we need to talk." The imminent disclosure was to be a four-word statement: "Dad, we need to talk." The imminent disclosure was to be a four-word statement: "Dad, we need to talk." The imminent disclosure was to be a four-word statement: "Dad, we need to talk." The imminent disclosure was to be a four-word statement: "Dad, we need to talk." The imminent disclosure was to be a four-word statement: "Dad, we need to talk." The imminent disclosure was to be a four-word statement: "Dad, we need to talk." The imminent disclosure was to be a four-word statement: "Dad, we need to talk." The imminent disclosure was to be a four-word statement: "Dad, we need to talk." The imminent disclosure was to be a four-word statement: "Dad, we need to talk." I was initially taken aback, but eventually came to accept the situation. My daughter was waiting in my room to assist me with the relocation of belongings. I was astonished to realize that my children were concerned about my personal affairs, while I had assumed that I was the one who should be mindful of theirs. I was at a loss for words, unable to respond. I simply sat there, at a loss for what to say. When my children and I were about to complete our homework, they informed me that they had decided to complete their studies. I proceeded to my room, where I found IET waiting for me. We exchanged glances and shared a brief, amused exchange that evening. I entered her apartment, to the delight of both young people. While undergoing a change of shift at work, I was assigned the responsibility of overseeing the construction of two new facilities, one in the United Kingdom and the other in Germany. Additionally, the company was in the process of developing new plants in Japan and South Korea. The stipulated timeframe for completion was 2 years, necessitating my presence at each of the European sites to ensure adherence to the agreed-upon schedule. 3 months prior to Christmas, I was informed by my mentors at work that I had been abruptly elevated to the position of supervisor. This entailed the supervision of 7 women and young girls working part-time. During the period in which Mark was under my supervision, I observed him on a few occasions, yet we did not engage in any form of communication. However, the security personnel who had intervened on my behalf when Mark was exhibiting disruptive behavior initiated several conversations with me. I discovered that his name was Mike and that he was English. One evening, following the conclusion of the wedding reception, Mike entered the premises to assist with the cleaning. Despite the fact that his responsibilities did not include such tasks, he approached me, appearing visibly distressed. "Hello, Michael, what is the matter? It would appear that your beverage has been misappropriated. I must confess that I am not accustomed to such actions. I had presumed that you would be amenable to sharing a repast at some point. I am aware of a suitable establishment." I regarded Mike, pondering how I had previously been taken advantage of by an individual who was aware of my history and presumed me to be trustworthy. I regarded Mike, who seemed so insecure, and dismissed the notion as unworthy of consideration. I found Mike agreeable, but I still held feelings for Jim and wished I considered the possibility that, if he were to discover that I was dating Mike, it might complicate our potential rekindling of our relationship. Mike then interjected, stating that he understood my past and that I was interested in reconciling with Jim. However, I clarified that my invitation to dinner was not an indication of any commitment on my part. I merely extended an invitation for a single evening of conversation and companionship. "Linda, I am aware of your past and your desire to reconcile with Jim. However, I am only extending an invitation to dinner, and I am not making any promises. I am open to discussing this further, but for now, I am simply offering an opportunity for us to meet in person. I am flexible regarding the date, but I am currently unavailable on Saturdays. I have courses on Saturday. Let's pick me up at 8. I scrolled my address on a napkin and presented it to him. His face glowed like a neon sign. I hoped he didn't think our date was more than it was. Then I remembered I'd mistakenly thought of it as a date with another man. I am looking forward to meeting him. Saturday arrived, and I was as scared as a long-tailed cat in a room filled with rocking chairs. 8. As the hour of midnight approached, I considered the possibility of canceling the entire affair. However, I ultimately decided to proceed with the plan, as I was unable to bring myself to harm Mike at 8 o'clock. At 8 o'clock, I heard a knock on the door. I looked through the security peephole and saw Mike standing there. I opened the door and let him in. He was wearing a fine suit, which prompted me to question how a security guard could afford such attire. I took my coat and he took my hand, leading me to his car, a BMW SUV. It was an expensive vehicle, and I wondered if it was truly his or if he had borrowed it. I hoped he hadn't. He had spent a considerable sum on expensive props with the sole intention of impressing me. Upon our arrival at the restaurant, I was immediately struck by its opulence. It was, without a doubt, one of the most expensive restaurants in the entire city. As we entered, the receptionist inquired whether we had reservations. I assumed that Mike would decline, but I was curious to see whether they would be able to accommodate us before he could respond. The man who had greeted us was none other than Mr. Smith. He shook Mike's hand, saying, "Walk with me, please. You again, especially in such company. Please come this way." He escorted us to our table. I was astonished to observe the security guard's considerable influence. When the maitre d' departed, a waiter approached with a menu and took our drink order. I looked at Mike, who was smiling, and raised my eyebrows in surprise. "I apologize, Linda. I have a confession to make. I'm not actually a security guard. I was not, as you may have assumed, an unnecessary interloper when you initially encountered me and requested my assistance in monitoring the activities of the local populace. At that time, I was positioned in lieu of a security personnel who was scheduled to be present but had instead notified his employer of his inability to attend. My brother and I oversee the operations of a security enterprise, and the convention center is among our clientele. I ask that you extend me your forgiveness. However, I am perplexed by your apparent reluctance to acknowledge my presence over the past several weeks. Had I been afforded the opportunity to interact with you, I might have mustered the courage to pursue a romantic relationship with you. I lacked experience in the field of dating and was unsure of the appropriate course of action. I sought counsel from my brother, Tom, who advised me to simply inquire. He further suggested that I should not be deterred by the possibility of rejection and should proceed with my intentions. Thus, I initiated contact and am now awaiting a response. While I am grateful for the interest expressed by Michael, I am not yet prepared to travel to Holland. I am open to further opportunities, should they arise. However, I must emphasize that I am not in a position to bear the financial burden of such a trip. Jim has provided me with invaluable support in this regard. He provided me with excellent care, so there is no need for concern on that front. Jim seems to be a very kind individual. If it is not an imposition, please tell me more about him. You did not extend an invitation for me to visit and discuss my former partner, so let us turn the focus to you. I understand your English, but I am curious about how you came to be here with your brother. It is a lengthy story, but if you are genuinely interested, I will provide a brief summary. Michael, I would like to hear it. As you requested, I will provide you with a detailed account of my background. I come from a family with a long history of military service. My father and uncle both served in the armed forces. After graduating from university, my brother and I joined the Royal Marines. I was injured in an improvised explosive device attack in Helmand province, resulting in the amputation of my left leg. I was subsequently discharged from the military. Subsequently, the difference in my mobility is barely perceptible, and I am able to dance at a normal pace. My brother joined me after sustaining a knee injury that prevented him from passing medical examinations. Our parents passed away while we were enrolled in university. As the eldest sibling, I inherited our family's wealth. Our family is considered affluent within British standards, and we opted to sell our assets. We relocated to the United States to reinvest our family fortune. Tom insisted on sharing the inheritance, so we founded a security company. Tom manages the East Coast branch while I manage the remaining branches, which are actually smaller. Tom married Kim, the nurse who took care of him after he was injured. She was in the medical corps and held a higher rank than him. He was a lieutenant. Furthermore, she was already the captain. As for the rest, Jim served in the British Army, specifically in an aircraft maintenance unit. I am curious as to which unit he served in, as he never mentioned it. However, there were pictures on the walls in his office, and he dropped one as he left. I can show it to you if you would like. I would prefer to do so when I drop you off. The meeting proceeded without incident. Upon my departure, he accompanied me to the door and exited quietly as I closed it. I then realized that I had not shown him the picture, so I retrieved it and placed it on the table as a reminder. We subsequently met at the same restaurant on 2 additional occasions, and the outcome remained unchanged. However, I did not show him the picture, as I was preoccupied with other matters. My parents expressed a desire to speak with me. Upon my arrival at the Thanksgiving gathering, the expressions on the faces of my relatives did not bode well. As you are aware, we have been in communication with Jim and his children in recent months. The situation is that Jim has extended an invitation to us to stay with him for Christmas. Consequently, we will not be in attendance at your Christmas gathering this year. I hope you can comprehend the circumstances, Mother. I believe it is a wonderful opportunity for you to be able to see the children and express my affection for them. Perhaps you could discuss with Jim and Gail the possibility of speaking with me. Do not concern yourself with my well-being. I have a great deal of work to do. I will be fine. I informed Mike that I would be available for Christmas, and he was delighted. He plans to visit his brothers and would like me to accompany him. He must have noticed my expression and quickly added that it would be as friends. Of course, there will be separate rooms and no romantic involvement. I can assure you that I spoke with Tommy over Christmas. Furthermore, my parents-in-law appeared somewhat uneasy, as they informed me that neither Gail nor Jim would converse with me. While I was no longer in as much discomfort as I had been previously, I still found myself weeping inconsolably that night. I had a wonderful time with Mike and his family. Tom and Kim were contemplating starting a family and inquired about my children. When I began to sob, they apologized and shifted the subject later that night. Kim and I was alone while the boys cleaned up, and she inquired as to the nature of my distress. I was uncertain as to the extent of her knowledge, but she appeared to possess an intuitive understanding, stating that Mike had not disclosed any information about me to her beyond the fact that I was merely a friend and required my own space. Mike and Tom were engaged in watching a British soccer match in the kitchen, rendering them inaudible for a considerable duration. I gazed at Kim, and I was compelled to divulge the entire truth about how I had ruined my husband's life for a single night of passion and how much I regretted it now. By the end of our conversation, I was inconsolably crying, and Kim embraced me, stroking my back, and escorted me to my room, where she sat with me. Linda, I began, I am truly sorry for your troubles, but where is Mike? I proceeded to tell her about how Mike had saved me from Mark. She reacted with a brief, amused laugh. I explained that Mike is aware of the situation and that we are merely friends with no expectations of a romantic or sexual nature. We enjoy each other's company. Does Mike know that you are still hoping for you and Jim to be together? I have made it clear that I want to reconcile with my husband. He means a great deal to me, and I am prepared to do whatever it takes to win his forgiveness and restore our relationship to its former state. Linda, you must acknowledge that the likelihood of a reconciliation is minimal. The probability of achieving this outcome is low. If I had treated Tom in the same manner as you treated Jim, we would both be deceased at this moment. Jim would have to be an exceptional individual to leave you with the resources to live the lifestyle you are currently leading. However, I do not perceive any potential for reconciliation. It is essential to be honest with yourself and willing to relinquish Jim when the time is right. If you accept Mike, he will likely pursue a romantic relationship with you. For the appropriate reason, as if you were to cause him harm, you would have to confront me, and the outcome would not be favorable. You are aware of what I am referring to. Before you commit to Mike, you must consider that he is deeply in love with you. I am aware that he cares about me, but he has not even attempted to kiss me. He has been a perfect gentleman each time we have met. I am unsure of what to say now. It would be best to maintain a distance until you have resolved your feelings. I request that you divulge your feelings. Let us join the other men and consume alcohol. The evening proceeded as she had suggested, and the following morning, I was afflicted with a hangover. During dinner, Mike inquired about Jim's military service. I recalled placing a photograph of Jim and his companions in my suitcase to present to Mike at a later time. I retrieved it and showed it to Mike, who exhibited a reaction that was not what I had anticipated. I had anticipated that he would appear surprised, then concerned, and would hand the picture to Tom, who seemed to have been taken aback. Kim, seeing his reaction, promptly approached him and looked at the picture. "What did you tell Mike about Jim's activities at the service?" I inquired. "I believe he mentioned servicing airplanes," Kim replied. We then observed the three men looking at me, then back at the picture. It seemed as though they were suddenly affected by something. "What did he say?" Kim inquired, his expression indicating a hint of amusement. "Did he say, special airplane service?" I confirmed. "Yes, that's right. Airplane maintenance," he replied. "Have you ever heard the term SAS on TV or in the newspapers?" I asked. "Yes, of course. They're like our Green Berets, aren't they?" "That's correct." "Only better," he replied. "That's right. Your Green Berets are modeled after the SAS, I confirmed. "That's correct," he replied. Linda's SAS stands for Special Air Service. I was astonished to discover that Jim was a trained killer. I had been unaware of this. Tom requested that I indicate Jim in the photograph. When I did so, he inhaled sharply. "Linda," Mike informed me that he had served in the Royal Marines. Moreover, he was a commando, an elite unit of the British Army. I also served in the Royal Marines but was recruited into the SAS in my second year. "I met your husband, but his name at the time was James Devon. He was in charge of the British Army's most lethal unit. He volunteered for the most gruesome assignments that no one else would touch." I was rendered speechless. My Jim was a killer. I felt cold, not just cold but numbly cold, and I began to shiver. Kim saw what was happening and promptly procured a blanket, which she draped over me. Tom swiftly retrieved the call and prepared it for use. "Mike, if I am unable to stop the shivering, you need to provide physical comfort. We need to call 911. The following minutes elapsed in a state of rapid succession, and I found myself situated in a remote location. I consumed the chocolate and began to feel better, but then I experienced the urge to use the bathroom. I informed Kim about my situation and she assisted me in reaching the bathroom. "Do not close the door. I am outside. Call me if you require anything." I remained in that position, but nothing occurred. I was unable to urinate. I began to lose consciousness, and I felt a sharp, intense heat. A wave engulfed my body. The last thing I remember is calling out to Kim, and then the floor hits me in the face. I thought I heard Linda calling my name, but I could not be sure if it was a whisper. However, I definitely heard a thump, so I walked in. Linda was lying on the floor, and I yelled to the boys that I needed help. When they came, I told them to put her on the couch and call 911. I laid her on the couch and put pillows under her legs and feet. I then proceeded to measure her pulse, which was 7.5 beats per minute, and her blood pressure, which was also low at 112/70. Upon the arrival of the ambulance personnel, they initiated the administration of oxygen and informed me that my actions had been appropriate. I then explained that I had been a nurse in the Army and that I had kept my first aid kit up to date. They expressed their gratitude and inquired if I wished to accompany Linda to the hospital. I concurred, and thus accompanied Linda to the hospital. Upon regaining consciousness, she inquired about the situation. I informed her that she had experienced a sudden drop in blood pressure, which had caused her body to shut down. She was admitted to the hospital for observation and discharged the following afternoon. Upon meeting Mike at the hospital, I was still somewhat unsteady, but I did not inform the doctor of this, as I was eager to return home. Mike suggested that I return home as soon as possible. He informed me that my collapse had caused them a great deal of concern and that it was fortunate that Kim was knowledgeable about the situation. I apologized for causing them distress, but Mike dismissed the incident as a typical Christmas occurrence. Upon our return to Tom and Kim's residence, I offered my sincerest apologies and expressed my gratitude to Kim for saving my life. She reassured me that I was not in any imminent danger, as the ambulance personnel would have handled the situation regardless. She explained that her actions had simply saved them time. After dinner that night, Mike and I boarded the plane, and Mike walked me to the door. I thanked him for a great Christmas and apologized again. He kissed me on the cheek and left. I wondered if I would ever see him again, since I had put his life in danger. I hardly slept that night, imagining that every noise was an assassin sent by Jim to destroy me. Eventually, I fell into a heavy sleep, holding the little 32 cell. I utilized the telephone that Jim had procured for me. I subsequently reunited with my parents at the airport, where they expressed satisfaction at my return but exhibited a degree of reserve when I inquired about the circumstances surrounding the device. They asserted that it was merely a matter of a time zone change. When I inquired about the specifics of our Christmas celebration, I informed them that I had thoroughly enjoyed myself but chose to remain silent about Jim and my emotional response to his past actions. I then proceeded to drive them home and pledged to ensure my punctual arrival for the New Year's Eve dinner. I arrived at my parents' residence at approximately 11 o'clock. At 11:30, I arrived at my parents' house. My father greeted me and informed me that my mother was in the kitchen. My father followed me, and my mother handed me some mulled wine. I was staying the night, so I did not have to worry about drinking and driving. However, both parents looked somewhat nervous. I was curious as to why lunch and dinner had gone smoothly. My mother informed me that we would FaceTime with the children later. This improved my mood considerably, as I had been picking up on my parents' mood all day. The parents' moods remained unchanged throughout the day. When the time came, Dad opened his laptop, and we waited for the notification that someone wanted to FaceTime with us. Approximately 10 minutes later, the notification came through. Mom went first and talked to Tommy, and then Gail. I listened to my daughter talk so candidly to Mom when she wasn't talking to me. Dad went next, and then Tommy and I talked for about 15 minutes, and as we were saying goodbye, a voice in the background indicated that someone wished to speak with me. I was overcome with emotion. It was Gail. I was elated that my daughter would finally communicate with me. "Hello, baby. I have missed you so much. I am grateful that you have finally reached out to me. It means a great deal to me. How are you?" "Hello, Mommy. I will no longer use that term. From now on, you may call me Linda. If you are not comfortable with that, I understand. I must accept your absence, but I require a full account of your actions since you left. In return, I will listen to your explanations. Please clarify why you have caused such distress to our family and nearly killed Papa. I have seen evidence that you still possess the firearm you used against him. I also observed you looking at our family portrait on your dresser and then putting the pistol away. This suggests that you may have intended to harm yourself as well. Please elucidate the rationale behind your actions. It would be greatly appreciated if you could provide a satisfactory explanation. I was inconsolable, and I am unsure of the reason for my actions. I have regretted them ever since, and I am acutely aware of the pain I have caused you all. I implore you to forgive me and allow me the opportunity to make amends. Please give me a chance, Linda. When you are in possession of the full facts, perhaps we will be able to communicate again. Before I proceed, I must bid you farewell, Linda." I sat with tears in my eyes, pondering how I could possibly regain custody of my child, let alone Jim. My mother informed me that Jim wished to speak with me. I was uncertain if I had correctly interpreted her statement, but I gazed at her with hope in my eyes. She handed me the laptop, and Jim gazed at me. I experienced a sudden loss of consciousness due to the intense dizziness. "Jim, it is I, we must converse." "Oh, God, Jim, I have desired to speak with you. Since that night, I have attempted to explain everything, but I was not myself. I am unsure what came over me. I was foolish. I am confident that you will forgive me. You are so convinced of your love for me that you will understand and accept me back. Linda, I am not here to try to reconcile the fact that the opportunity for reconciliation has passed. I need to speak with you so you realize why we can. The betrayal of my trust in you when you eloped with Lavinia irreparably damaged my sense of trust in others. I have loved you unconditionally since we met, and your actions have caused irreparable damage to my emotional well-being. I contemplated suicide as a means of escaping the pain, but I ultimately chose to prioritize the well-being of my children. If I had died, they would have been raised by an unfaithful spouse and her romantic partner. You would have gained access to the resources that I had accumulated, including children, financial stability, a home, and a partner to enjoy the fruits of your labor. In response, I will seek to exact retribution for the pain you have caused me. While you will retain ownership of the house, furthermore, the individual in question possesses a limited financial reserve. In addition, the individual must exert effort to achieve their goals. It became evident that Mark terminated the relationship as soon as he was able to do so. In response, I took action to disrupt his career. Upon observing the television, I noticed Jim silently crying. My heart constricted. I had nearly caused significant damage to my husband, lost my children, and then made an ill-considered remark. However, I still hold a deep affection for you, Jim. It was only one night. Can we simply move on from this? I had assumed you already resided with Mike. However, it seems Mike was aware of his roommate's existence, but not necessarily of the full extent of his actions. Is this true? Jim, I engaged in a romantic relationship with Mike, but we have since become merely friends. We did not engage in any sexual activity. I swear on my life, Jim, that nothing inappropriate occurred. I have not moved out of the house. I still desire a romantic relationship with you. Thank you, Jim. Can we meet to discuss the situation further? Linda, you claim that nothing has changed, but I have experienced significant personal changes. When we arrived at my uncle's chateau, I was emotionally distressed and uncertain about my future. My life had fallen apart, and I was overwhelmed. I had only a month to prepare myself for a new career, the children needed a new school, and we had numerous other challenges to address. The property was in 2 boxes. Julie recognized my situation and immediately introduced me to his assistant. Upon initial observation, the assistant decided to address the situation independently. She relocated the children to their respective rooms, situated on either side of mine. Over the following weeks, she enrolled them in an exemplary educational institution for foreign diplomats, accompanied them on shopping excursions, and assumed the role of Gail's primary mentor. She facilitated my shopping experience, ensuring I had the necessary attire to transition to my new role at the factory. She effectively assumed control of our lives until I accepted my new circumstances. As a single father, I relied on her more and more, and as a result, we became closer. It wasn't until our divorce was finalized that we admitted we loved each other and kissed for the first time. I understand you think she took advantage of me, but she did not. If she hadn't convinced me to have the kids contact you and your parents, we wouldn't be having this conversation. The point of this talk is that I asked IET to be my wife, and she said yes. I still love her, but not as much as I used to. I don't hate you anymore, and the desire while I no longer seek vengeance, I am unable to forgive you for your actions. If we were to resume our relationship, I would always be uncertain about your whereabouts and the company you kept. This is an unacceptable way for a married couple to live. It will continue to affect us both for years to come. Allow Mike into your heart, but do not treat him with the same disrespect you showed me. Love him wholeheartedly and move on with your life. This is when I realized my life was unraveling and my father had to intervene and take me to bed. Jim, I was crying so hard when Sam assumed the role previously held by Linda, and Sarah assumed the role previously held by Sam. I am grateful to you, Jim, for your efforts to avoid causing her pain. We appreciate your consideration. Will you continue to communicate with me and Sam? Can we maintain communication with the children? Sarah, there has been no change in our circumstances. We simply needed to discuss matters. We will speak next Sunday. We scheduled the wedding for June and our honeymoon. I took a cruise. We invited Sam and Sarah, but they declined because they felt it was inappropriate. The following 2 years passed quickly. Gail was 18 years old and aspired to pursue a career in law, eventually obtaining French citizenship. Tommy, who was already 16, expressed a desire to travel to the United States to visit his grandparents and mother. Gail consented to accompany him but declined to meet with Linda. Linda and Mike had been married for 6 months and seemed content. I was pleased for them, but I still held affection for Linda and wished for her happiness. Last year, the legal dispute against the village was finally settled, resulting in compensation being distributed. Each of us received 1 unit. I invested $3 million in the children on their 25th birthdays. I subsequently learned that Linda had invested her money and started her own restaurant business, which was doing well. The proposed factories had begun operations, and I was appointed regional manager for France, Germany, and the United Kingdom. I had a new office, which was quite impressive, and I had to travel extensively. IET used to travel with me and store my belongings while I was at meetings. She no longer worked as Joel's assistant and instead trained her replacement. Additionally, the company had regional. Additionally, I was appointed managers for Japan and Korea, as well as one for the United States. My income had tripled, and we were on the verge of purchasing our own home. However, Joel expressed his desire for us to remain in our current residence, citing his preference for the company of family. We deliberated over his proposal and ultimately decided to remain with him indefinitely. Tommy was pleased with this arrangement, as he had recently begun dating one of the maid's daughters. During one of our visits, I informed Linda that Gail and Tommy would be staying with her parents for the summer vacation. I also informed Tommy that I had no objections to her caring for the children. I inquired as to whether he wished to remain with his mother for a period of time. I then asked if she was amenable to this arrangement. She immediately became visibly emotional and was unable to speak for a few moments. Mike then appeared on the scene, looking displeased. He was about to reprimand me for upsetting his wife when Linda interrupted him. She proceeded to explain the reason for her tears. Mike then apologized, stating that he would be willing to take Tommy in for a few weeks. I then called Tommy into the room and explained what had transpired. He was overjoyed and began conversing with his mother. I subsequently left them and went in search of a veterinarian. I was in the kitchen, looking concerned. I assumed this was because I was returning to the United States for a formal dinner and dance hosted by my company that I was supposed to attend with my spouse. The company was sponsoring a charity event for war veterans in the United States. In addition to the CEO, other regional managers would be present. It was made clear that if we served, we should wear our old uniforms out of respect. All of this would occur on Veterans Day, November 11th. I assumed AET was concerned that I would see Linda forgive her and reconcile. I tried to explain that it would never happen. I attempted to reassure her that such a reconciliation was highly unlikely to occur, but she merely laughed and stated that it did not trouble her. This prompted me to question what might be the source of her unease. She handed me an object that resembled a small plastic thermometer. Upon closer examination, I observed a clear window with a negative and positive indicator, as well as a dark blue line on the positive side. When I turned it over, I saw that it was a pregnancy test kit. I then turned to the veterinarian, who seemed frightened. She likely anticipated a negative reaction from me. I embraced her, kissed her heart, and then began to cry. I was overcome with joy. We stood there for what felt like an eternity. Both of us crying with joy. I was unsure how to respond, but I was not angry. In fact, I was the happiest person in the world. How long had I known this? Just today. I had been afraid you'd come home angry. We need to take you to the doctor to confirm this. We will go tomorrow, but today we simply went out to have fun. The next day, I felt like I was walking on air. I contacted work, canceled all of my plans for the day, and took the day off. Next, I scheduled an appointment with our family doctor. The doctor stated that she was probably 6 weeks along and doing well. I inquired as to whether your veterinarian would be able to accompany me to the United States in 4 months. He responded that, contingent upon the absence of any unforeseen issues, everything would be satisfactory. Tommy and Gail spent the summer with their grandparents, and Gail took advantage of the opportunity to reconnect with former acquaintances. Tommy spent the first week with his grandparents before meeting and residing with his mother for the subsequent 3 weeks. I recommended that they return home a week in advance to reorient themselves before the commencement of the academic year. They both indicated that they had a favorable experience, but Gail was reluctant to communicate with her mother. Subsequently, she retreated to her room. During the fundraising week, IET, she made an appearance, showcasing her growing abdomen. I proceeded to visit Linda's parents. Linda would be in attendance as one of the organizers. I discovered that she was in charge of food and that Mike and Tom would be donning their veteran uniforms. I suggested canceling the event, but she declined, stating that she had never seen me in uniform. This concluded the discussion. Sam and Sarah were planning to attend as Sam is also a veteran. However, they will be accompanying friends from the local Veterans Association. The festivities will commence in the afternoon. A special auction was held, featuring items donated by local businesses and military families. Our company has donated a painting by the artist Han, which was estimated to sell for more than $400. The highest bidder will receive the item in question from our CEO at the scheduled evening feast, which is set to commence at 6 o'clock. the event commenced at 6 p.m. The celebration was to be formal, with the guests announced at the entrance. The intention was for the host to declare the guests' titles, if any, along with their names, rank, and regiment. He was then to announce the name and status of the guest's companion. I wore my uniform for the first time in nearly 20 years and was pleased to find that it still suited me well. I had maintained my physical fitness by running in the mornings, going to the gym 3 times a week, and working out at the local dojo with my instructor. As I stepped down the stairs to my mother-in-law at the law residence, a veteran emitted a loud inhalation, prompting Sam and Sarah to direct their gazes towards me. Sam was the first to respond, expressing shock at my apparent lack of emotional distress. Sarah, on the other hand, merely covered her lips and displayed a look of horror as I descended the stairs. IET then proceeded to embrace me, while Mom sure commented on my appearance, noting that I looked really classy. I must assert my authority and repel the females with a stick. You never informed me of the services you provide. I wish to learn everything. I was disconcerted to observe that Sam and Sarah had departed before we had the opportunity to converse further. They had expressed a desire to collect an ex-serviceman from the veterans' home. I proceeded to the designated location and awaited the announcement. During this period, I became aware that a considerable number of individuals were regarding me with interest. They appeared to be engaged in conversation with their acquaintances, pointing to my white beret with the winged dagger badge. I was approached by a soldier wearing a green beret who wanted to shake my hand. He remarked, "You don't remember me, but I do remember you. I was taken prisoner and was going to be executed when your team stormed in and slaughtered everyone." I was profoundly moved by this encounter and expressed my gratitude. He seized the opportunity to express his gratitude in person, grasping my hand and offering a handshake. We acknowledged each other as allies and comrades in arms. "If there is anything I can do for you, please do not hesitate to ask," he said. He then presented me with his business card. "We are brothers in arms," he stated. "We have gone where others feared to go." He then excused himself, returning to his girlfriend. It was now our turn to make the announcement. We proceeded to greet Mr. James Carlyle, a former lieutenant in Her Majesty's Special Air Service, and his wife, IET Carlyle. We then made our way downstairs to the curious stairs. The majority of the attendees ceased their conversations as one of the waiters led us to our designated seating area. We were seated with the remainder of our group at our table. Our CEO, Chris Watkins, stated that we were a charming couple. He then chided me, saying, "You should have warned me that you are a member of the world's deadliest regiment. The rest of us don't wear uniforms since you're the only one serving, and we seem out of place." He made a remark to the effect that he was pleased to be seated beside me, smiling as he did so. He then proceeded to order a drink while we waited for our food. I looked around for Linda and observed that she was seated at a round table alongside her husband and another couple. I immediately recognized her husband's uniform, which indicated that he was a lieutenant in the Royal Marines. The second man at the table was also in uniform. I recognized Tom Walker, an SAS officer or RERT, as the privates nicknamed us. I had already met him while he was assisting my unit when they rescued me. He returned my gaze with a nod. I now realized he and Linda's husband were related, and I was curious how much he had told them about me. Looking around, I was both surprised and delighted to see Mark Lavalier and a couple of his acquaintances at another table. Due to the large number of patrons, it was not feasible to serve everyone simultaneously. Consequently, some had already finished dining while others were still waiting. I indicated to Linda that she was in charge of serving. "I must say that I find your ex quite attractive. If we were not married, I would be quite jealous. Might I inquire as to whether you intend to introduce me to her? Furthermore, why do you wish to meet her? It is always beneficial to know your enemy, is it not? We are no longer enemies. You saw for yourself that she is merely someone I used to know, and she means nothing to me now. You have no cause for envy. You are the sole individual I hold in high regard. You are already aware of this. I am merely jesting with you. I am aware that you understand my meaning, and I am teasing you with my French accent." I squeezed your hand to accentuate my words. "Linda, I was seated with Mike, Tom, and Kim when the announcer proclaimed Jim's arrival. All discussion ceased. And everyone turned to look at each other. The same thing occurred when Tom was introduced earlier. It seems that the mystique was infectious. The four of us looked over as Jim and AET descended the steps. Tommy and my parents had informed me that she was gorgeous, but I was not anticipating that she would be so stunning. I was compelled to vocalize my admiration, though I quickly suppressed the urge. She was, without a doubt, the most radiant and alluring woman I had ever laid eyes on. Even with a slight protrusion at the front, her beauty was still more pronounced than mine. I was merely a commoner from the neighborhood. I had no chance of competing with her. It was evident that Jim had undergone a transformation. We observed them leisurely making their way to their table. Upon seating himself, Jim removed his beret and tucked it under his shoulder. He did so without conscious thought, as if it were a routine action. This observation prompted a sense of gratitude for my own existence. I discreetly glanced in Jim's direction, hoping to avoid detection. However, Jim had noticed my gaze and simply nodded in acknowledgement before turning away. My heartbeat accelerated slightly, and I experienced a sense of remorse since I had married someone else. Jim was engaged in animated conversation with the other men at his table, none of whom were wearing uniforms. Jim rose to go somewhere and vanished from view. Then I observed a veterinarian striding purposefully towards me, approaching our table. Tom and Mike rose to after introductions were made. A veterinarian took a seat next to me. "Hello, Linda. It seems that our marriages to the same person have brought us together. If it were not so evident that you admire your husband, I would challenge your beauty and elegance. I believe it is time for you and Jim to reconcile." I suggested that we resume our friendship, which gave Jim no choice but to join me. He was already tired of talking to the gentlemen at our table, and their wives had yet to initiate conversation with me. I believed that joining you in your company would make the evening more enjoyable for both of us. We could discuss children, and she then proceeded to discuss marital issues, and the boys could reminisce if it was not an inconvenience. She then glanced around the table, and it was evident that everyone agreed with her sentiments. She had managed to enchant everyone with a few simple words. She then reached out and squeezing my hand, she added, "I hope we can stay friends and not let a small thing like divorce come between us." In France, the concept of love and romance is deeply entrenched in the culture. While waiting for Jim to return, we engaged in further conversation. When he returned, he initially sought out IET. Upon seeing her at our table, he gave a shrug and approached. He stood behind a veteran and placed his hands on her shoulders. He then uttered the French idiom, "When a French woman makes a decision, do not attempt to alter it." I comprehend that, given my wife's consent, I may also take a seat. There were murmurs of assent, so I sat down. Upon my return from the restroom, I was approached by two green berets, one of whom was the same individual I had encountered earlier, and the other whom I did not know but was introduced as his brother. I was reluctant to return to my original table, as I was not keen on meeting any further representatives from our company. The conversation had reached a standstill, and we were struggling to identify new topics for discussion. I was not inclined to leave, even in such a context, and therefore excused myself from the company of my two new acquaintances and returned to my original. As I was about to reach my table, I realized that I had not seen IET and experienced a sensation of déjà vu. I promptly glanced over to the Lil's table, where I was relieved to find Lavier seated there, conversing with his companions, all of whom appeared to be football players. I reflected on how I had doubted IET and realized the extent of my misgivings. I was intimidated by Linda's demeanor. I looked for AET and observed her engaged in conversation with Linda and her companions, exchanging pleasantries as if they were long-standing acquaintances. I approached them, uncertain of how to proceed, only to overhear the conclusion of IET's remarks. She was correct, and it was imperative to bring this narrative to a conclusion. I placed my hands on her shoulders. I then proceeded to place my hands on the shoulders of a veteran and requested permission to join their table. In response, Tim pushed a chair back between her and a vet, and I sat down. It was evident from the expressions on the faces of those present that they were expecting me to make a statement to the entire table. Given that everyone here is aware of the circumstances surrounding Linda and my subsequent breakup, I deemed it unnecessary to reopen old wounds. "You have caused me an immeasurable amount of distress and anger. I have taken your children from you. It is unclear which of us has caused the greater harm. You have apologized to me, it is now my turn. I apologize for kidnapping your children. There was likely a more constructive way to retaliate against you than what I did. I attempted to persuade Gail to reconcile with you, but she is just as intractable as you are. I will continue to work on her, and I am optimistic that we will ultimately succeed. Tommy is a different matter. He senses the distance between us, and I intend to let him decide for himself whose parent he wants to live with. If he chooses me, I will ensure that he spends the majority of his vacation time with you. Conversely, if he chooses you, I hope you will reciprocate. We have a significant issue to resolve regarding Linda. I forgive you and wish you and Mike a very happy life together. Linda stood up and hugged me. I looked at my new colleagues and said, I need to do one more thing. The final piece of the puzzle was yet to be revealed. I cast my gaze across the room to locate Liler, who was seated at the table. It was assumed that I would proceed to destroy him as I stood up. I was restrained from doing so by Kim, who advised against such an action. As I approached the bar, I could hear AET sobbing. However, I was compelled to proceed. I proceeded to procure my men card by ordering a bottled beer. I approached the Villers table, paused, regarded him up and down, and said hello. It was likely that he did not remember me, as our encounter had occurred several years prior. I was there to fulfill a promise I had made, though he did not recall me. I inquired as to his identity and the purpose of his visit. Several years ago, he had done me a favor. You took my wife away from me to a nightclub and exposed her as a dishonest and useless individual. You gave me a letter with images, and I responded with a note thanking you for making my wife seem like I said that if we ever met I'd shake your hand and buy you a beer. Therefore, I extend my hand and offer you a beer. I extended my hand, which he shook. He gave me a self-satisfied grin, though his friend seemed uneasy. I placed the bottle on the table and said, enjoy. Since you don't appear to remember me, I'll refresh your memory. Do you remember when you were done with my wife and about to take her home, there were many reporters waiting for you at the gate? That was me. When you got her home, there were more. I have also made arrangements with the TV show, Celebrity Behaving Badly, to do a special about you and your affairs with married women. I was grateful to you for exposing my wife's infidelity, but I was unhappy that you had harmed my children, who had to grow up without their mother. Furthermore, I financed the lawyer who filed the class action lawsuit. This ultimately resulted in the loss of half of your fortune. It is, in fact, my responsibility for your departure from the esteemed team that had previously been regarded as one of the finest in the NFL. As a result, you now find yourself in the company of second-rate athletes, consuming inexpensive wine. You have caused irreparable damage to my wife and our marriage. In response, I have caused similar damage to yours. I bid you a pleasant day as I take my leave, having made my first mistake in this situation. I heard a yell, no, Mark. I spun back to see Mark approaching me, holding a steak knife above my head. As the knife fell, he approached quickly from approximately 5 feet away. My training took over, and I acted accordingly. I dove down and crossed my wrists to meet his downward thrust. Then, I grabbed his wrist with my right hand and pushed him forward as he collapsed and dropped the knife. I made my second mistake. An error was made when I stood up and turned my back on him. He then decided he was fatigued and returned to the table. I had moved approximately 10 steps when Mike pointed behind me and said, weapons. This was in response to the several threats to Mark's life. He had obtained a permit to carry a firearm, and his preferred weapon was a Derringer. When I turned to face him, he pulled the trigger while I hurled the knife, striking him in the process. There was a moment of silence until the situation rapidly escalated. 5 of Mark's companions sought to exact revenge and advanced on me with the intention of harming me. However, they were abruptly halted by Tom, Mike, and the 2 Green Berets with whom I had previously conversed. They determined that retreat was a more prudent course of action than confrontation and returned to their original positions. As the adrenaline faded, I began to feel discomfort and was helped to sit down in a chair. A crowd formed around us. Mark was chilly, and I began to shiver, realizing I was going into shock. Kim took charge and began directing people to their seats. She removed my tunic, placed 2 tissues over my wounds, and instructed a veterinarian to apply pressure. She then proceeded to do the same with Mark. Linda was visibly distressed and claimed that she was responsible for the situation. Mike attempted to calm her down. IET was visibly enraged, ranting at me and calling me a fool for risking my life to prove a point and nearly orphaning our unborn child. Kim stood by her and whispered gently, IET, don't be angry with Jim. He did what any red-blooded guy would do. He had to restore his alpha male position. A seasoned individual would have behaved similarly. He was compelled to reassert his alpha male position in the presence of the unruly individual sleeping nearby. He was, in fact, quite reserved. He was forced to confront Mark and subdue him physically in full view of all present. Mark was the instigator, not Jim. You are well acquainted with Jim, but I am not the appropriate person to discuss this with you. You will require further information. I inquired of Jim, but he seemed distant and unresponsive, as though he were not talking about me. I recall being placed on a gurney and transported to the ambulance. IET held my hand as Kim yelled and pressed on my wounds, urging her to do so with greater force. I was bleeding, and Linda was holding the blood bag and crying. My final conscious memory was of sitting in the driver behind me sounded the horn of his vehicle. I observed the traffic signal, which remained in the red position. I was uncertain as to the driver's intention. I decided that I had reached my limit and attempted to exit the vehicle. However, I was unable to do so due to the presence of a seat belt. I then became aware that someone was holding me, and the horn was the machine beside my bed. I ceased resisting and surveyed the room. The veterinarian was holding me, and the first thing I did was glance at her. I apologize if I have caused you harm, Jim, but the doctor said you were unable to move, so you are restrained in this position. I will inform the nurse, who is inquiring about your expected time of awakening. I attempted to react, but all I could produce was a moo. A nurse then entered the room and promptly examined my vital signs before releasing my restraints. You should be fine now, simply remain still. It is recommended that you remain still for the time being. The doctor will be arriving shortly, but until then, it is advisable to refrain from any movement. I sampled an ice chip, which, at the time, seemed to offer a superior level of refreshment to any malt whiskey. Upon taking in my surroundings, I observed that Linda was sleeping in a chair. I then directed my attention to a veterinarian, noting that she had been present since your arrival. It is my belief that she still harbors strong feelings for you. When she awakens, treat her with kindness. I am aware that I was shot, but I am perplexed by the commotion. I have been shot before, but this incident was more severe. Jim, you nearly perished. The bullet struck an artery, and the surgical team performed a delicate procedure to repair the wound. As a result, you have limited mobility. Kim was the one who realized. It became apparent that the wound was bleeding more than it should have been when the first ambulance arrived. The attending medical personnel initially expressed a preference for treating the villagers first, but Kim interceded and insisted that you be taken to the medical facility immediately. She must have been an exceptionally capable law enforcement officer, as the medical personnel were visibly intimidated by her and simply followed her instructions. She had called ahead to alert the trauma team, who had already assembled in the operating room. The room was awaiting your arrival, which proved to be a crucial factor in your survival. We are indebted to the woman for her actions. We engaged in further conversation until Linda regained consciousness. Jim, you are awake. How do you feel? We were all quite frightened. I am fine, thank you. Mike and Kim were instrumental in my recovery. Mike warned me, and Kim saved my life. Your husband should be with him. It is acceptable for you to remain here until you have extricated yourself from this situation. I will contact him to inform him of your whereabouts. I am delighted to hear that you will recover fully. When you are able to, please contact me so that we can celebrate together. She then leaned over the bed and kissed my forehead before leaving. The doctor permitted me to leave. I was discharged from the hospital 2 days later and advised to rest for the following 2 weeks. We had supper together and became firm friends. While there was some awkwardness at first, we managed to cover it when I asked whether anyone knew what had happened to Mark. I was told that he was still in the hospital's prisoners' ward awaiting trial. We maintained contact with one another, convening for dinner on an occasional basis. However, we refrained from delving into the past. Gail remains estranged from her mother and is now married to Pierre, a police officer in Paris. They recently celebrated the birth of a daughter, IET, who is a source of immense joy to her grandfather. However, Linda became visibly distressed when they informed her of the situation and subsequently departed the room. I suggested that Mike accompany her, but he informed me that he would instead remain behind. He is an admirable individual who does not succumb to envy. Consequently, I accompanied Linda outside. Upon approaching her, I observed that she was in a state of distress. When I embraced her for the first time since the previous night, she turned around and buried her face in my chest, sobbing. Over the subsequent 10 minutes, she smiled at me. I inquired as to whether I had truly made a mistake. If I could do it all over again, I would advise the village to refrain from interference. I hold great affection for Mike and am willing to do whatever is within my power to ensure his happiness. However, I am frequently perplexed by what might have been. Linda, you erred, but you have an opportunity for redemption. I urge you to seize it. I will speak. I attempted to communicate with Gail once more, although I was uncertain as to the efficacy of this course of action. Nevertheless, I persisted. Linda greeted me with a cordial kiss on the cheek, and we proceeded to return to the house. IET had recently given birth to a male infant, weighing 9 pounds 2 ounces, who was named Tommy. Now that Gail and Tom were adults, he was the apple of my eye. Tommy subsequently enrolled at the University of England to pursue a degree in engineering. He graduated with honors and then he astonished his family by enlisting in the army, and is now a lieutenant in the Royal Engineers, stationed in the Middle East. Gail, IET, and Linda are so anxious about him that they have developed ulcers. Tom, Mike, and I have attempted to reassure them that he is working away from the front lines and that whatever happens will happen. He attempts to split his vacation between in contrast to his sister, Linda, and I have never taken sides and are impartial. It is possible that he will alter his opinion once he gets married, as he may realize that it could happen to him too. After I was shot, the authorities charged Lavilla with 2 charges of attempted murder, and I sued him for actual bodily injury. He received 2 consecutive 15-year sentences. The settlement included a year-long term of compensation, amounting to $5 million. Consequently, each party received what they deemed appropriate. While there is confidence that Linda will not engage in infidelity again, the trust has been irrevocably damaged. It is therefore hoped that she will enjoy a long and happy life with Mike. The next story will be presented as a means of expressing emotions and sharing experiences. I am unable to confide in anyone in my personal life regarding this matter. My wife has been unfaithful to me for several months. I am at a loss as to how to process this information. We have a beautiful home and stable careers. We are not experiencing financial difficulties and do not engage in substance abuse. We attend therapy sessions together, and our daughter is healthy and thriving. In 3 months, it will be our 11th wedding anniversary. Over the past 2 days, I have been examining our relationship with great scrutiny, attempting to identify any shortcomings on my part that may have contributed to her unhappiness and decision to engage in an extramarital relationship with a man she met on Facebook. I am struggling to comprehend how she could abandon her family and our marriage. On Monday, my daughter's tablet ceased to function. I procured my wife's iPad so that she could view her evening videos and fall asleep. My wife is currently at home, she is on a trip and will be gone for another 4 days. I frequently hear message notifications and review my daughter's iPad when she is not using it. I then took the iPad and turned it to silence, only to see a man's name that I did not recognize with a winky face next to it. I have reviewed all of their activities, including their meetings, dates, and even a romantic cruise. She informed me that the cruise scheduled for next month was originally intended for a friend who was celebrating her bachelorette party. She also revealed that all of these social outings, which I had encouraged, were with friends. I had encouraged her to expand her social circle, and I was pleased to see her engaging with new people. However, she also expressed feelings of isolation and reclusiveness, which she attributed to the demands of motherhood. After further investigation, it became evident that many of the new friends she had made were not genuine. It appeared that she had created these personas to maintain her relationship with this man. I felt duped and misled. I had presumed that the information she had provided me was untruthful. I had placed my trust in her. We had been engaged in couples therapy for a year, and we had been communicating regularly. We had been going on dates and exchanging gifts. Our sex life had been excellent. I would never have suspected this. I am unsure of the best way to confront her about this. I do not want to end our marriage. However, I am aware that therapy cannot resolve this issue. I understand myself well enough to know that I will never be able to trust her again. Should I just let go and let her go with this man, who obviously makes her happier than I can? The issue at hand is the intertwining of her being with mine. It is unclear how one might begin to untangle and separate these elements. There are 4 days remaining to consider this matter. It is currently unclear what the best course of action might be. It would be prudent to seek the advice of the wider community on this matter. It is worth noting that there is a 4-day window in which a lawyer could be engaged to handle the divorce proceedings. At the very least, the necessary documentation should be prepared to present to the lawyer. It is important to note that this does not necessarily imply a commitment to proceed with the divorce. However, it is advisable to be prepared to take the necessary steps to remove her from the marital home. Thank you for your advice. It is recommended that a lawyer be contacted as soon as possible. The next person suggests looking up the individual in question on Facebook to ascertain his identity. If he is married or in a relationship, find a significant other on Facebook and send her the evidence obtained from the iPad. The moment she steps through the door, sit down with your wife and ask which friend she is going on the cruise with again. When she says whatever phony name, stop and ask if she means with a guy's name. Give her printouts of the entire conversation as well as the divorce documents. Hopefully, you don't live in a false state, so she gets nothing in the divorce. Make sure the divorce papers are all ready. It is imperative to have custody arrangements in place for your child. The scenario in which your wife is on a cruise with a Facebook acquaintance is a classic example of a situation in which she has been sailing on the ship of deception while you were merely passively trusting her. This leaves you in a position where you are forced to hold her iPad, which is not an ideal situation. The hope for revelation of a genie of infidelity instead manifests as a magic lamp. It is ironic that encouragement to socialize has led to the discovery that socialization has occurred with Captain Wink emoji. It is recommended that couples therapy be pursued with the objective of graduation. One strategy for preparing for divorce is to collect evidence and, perhaps, to arrange a surprise party for the other party, complete with divorce papers and digital copies of love letters. The expression on the other party's face when they realize what is happening is priceless. You have 4 days to consider your next move. One strategy is to make a game out of it. I posted about my experience almost a month ago, venting my frustrations about discovering my wife's affair. I received a great deal of advice and support in response. I am grateful for the numerous comments and messages I received, which were filled with advice and kind words. I am aware that many individuals took the time to comment or write to me, and I extend my sincerest apologies to anyone who related to my situation. I have somewhat of an update to share, but primarily, I wish to continue venting. My life is currently in a state of disarray, and it is cathartic to express my feelings. I apologize if this is perceived as ranting, and I regret the length of this post. After making my initial post, I heeded the advice of numerous individuals and I gathered all the evidence and contacted lawyers in my area. I found a highly competent one and proceeded to draft the divorce papers before my wife returned home. I also underwent testing for sexually transmitted infections and informed my parents' best friend about the situation. I took my daughter to stay with my parents so that I could have time alone to prepare mentally to face my wife with this discovery. I undertook a thorough cleaning of the house and experienced a period of intense emotional distress. Prior to her return, I had packed some of her belongings but then unpacked them and experienced further distress. My intention had been to lay out all the screenshots along with the divorce papers on her dining room table and simply wait for her, but I did not have the opportunity to do so. She was scheduled to return later in the afternoon on Sunday, but she actually arrived around 6:30 that morning. She did not contact me by phone or text message, in the hope that I would be surprised. I was drinking coffee and, as might have been anticipated, in a state of distress when she entered the house. I did not greet her. Instead, I retrieved the folder of evidence and the divorce papers and presented them to her. I do not recall her remarks that day, but I informed her that I wished to proceed with a divorce and that I intended to retain the house in my name. I was consumed by a desire to embrace her, yet I was also driven to express my anguish through a profusion of tears and impassioned words. I did not engage in any discourse with her. I informed her that we could discuss the matter further with legal counsel present once she had accepted the situation and had a chance to calm down. In the comments on my previous post, someone suggested the term "gray wall," which I believe to be an apt description. I attempted to maintain composure and refrain from displaying emotion or engaging in argumentation. It was a challenging endeavor, arguably the most challenging I have ever had to undertake. I had been betrayed by my partner, yet I still felt immense distress at having caused her distress. She departed with that she departed for her parents' residence, leaving behind some of her personal belongings. My parents and close friends also came to stay with me and my daughter. I arranged for a meeting with her through my lawyer to discuss custody, property, finances, and other related matters. The meeting was scheduled for the following Tuesday. However, on Monday, I received a call from my clinic requesting my presence to review the results of STI tests. To my dismay, the results revealed that she had transmitted her herpes simplex virus type 2, HSV-2, to me. The experience was indescribable. I am experiencing a range of intense emotions, including anger, sadness, and a sense of being shattered. I am still in the process of accepting this situation. I do not believe I have fully accepted it yet, but I am working on it. I recognize that this is a common occurrence and that it is not life-threatening. However, the experience has been profoundly challenging. I have joined a support group on Facebook, and the individuals in the group have been extremely helpful. However, going into Tuesday, I was still struggling with the knowledge that I had shared with her and both of our lawyers. I knew that discussing the matter in private would not have been productive. It would have been unproductive to discuss the matter with her privately, as she did not offer an apology. On that day, she seemed to be a different person. I felt like I was looking into the eyes of a complete stranger, devoid of any emotion. Divorce-wise, the process is straightforward. We are separated, and the house is in my name. We are simply waiting for the 90 days to elapse before the divorce is finalized. There were no objections from her end, but there was one. She has expressed a desire to terminate her parental rights over a daughter. I maintain that, at the very least, she should be attempting to do so. She has indicated that she no longer wishes to be involved with our daughter, whom we refer to as our baby. I was initially taken aback by this development. However, I am still grappling with the emotional impact of this decision. Our daughter is only 1 year old, and she has consistently demonstrated a strong attachment to me. She first uttered the word mama, which is how she refers to me. This has been a significant source of distress for me, as I am struggling to come to terms with this unexpected turn of events. It has been 3 weeks since this decision was made, and the pain and anguish I have experienced on behalf of my daughter and my family have been overwhelming. I find myself struggling to recognize the person I once knew. I am uncertain as to the precise moment at which my circumstances changed, but I am filled with trepidation at the prospect of what may have transpired. It is as though my entire existence has been abruptly upended. I have not been in communication with her. My understanding is that her legal counsel advised her to sever all contact, and I share their concern that attempting to communicate with her at this juncture would be unproductive. She informed me on the day in question that she no longer wished to have any contact with her daughter. She also requested that I remove any images from my home that might remind her of her daughter, as well as any items of clothing or electronic devices that might evoke memories of her. I find myself struggling to comprehend these developments. I doubt I ever will. We are obliged to attend a court hearing to consider her petition to terminate her rights. I am reluctant to engage with her directly. I am unable to accept this situation as truth at this time. Despite my best efforts to maintain a positive outlook and provide support for my family and child, I find this challenging. I hope that in a year's time I will be able to reflect on this period and consider it a period of resilience. However, at present, I am unable to envisage a future beyond the next week. I am not suicidal, so I do not intend to. Please do not misconstrue my words as an indication of any lack of emotional, intellectual, or physical stability on my part. I am, in fact, completely devastated and utterly destroyed. There was no element of swift thinking from the community. You appear to be entirely immersed in a state of confusion and uncertainty. It is truly unfortunate to learn that she does not want your daughter. It is evident that she is no longer interested in her, at least not at this point in her life. She is, in fact, an obstacle to her relationship with a suitable spouse. This is an extremely painful experience to read. She will undoubtedly regret her actions. This will have repercussions for the remainder of her life, although she is not yet aware of it. You are handling the situation extremely well. It would be advisable to conclude all legal matters before the situation becomes clearer and to seek assistance from relatives and friends. It is important to remain strong so that she arrives home early, perhaps expecting to surprise you with the joyful news that she is home, but instead finds herself confronted with the harsh reality of the situation. The morning begins with the arrival of documents, which is an apt way to commence the day, given the preceding events. Just as one might think the situation could not become more complex, a telephone call from the clinic delivers the news that your partner has been diagnosed with genital herpes type 2. This development is akin to a cherry on top of the world's worst sundae. While the infection is not fatal, it is not a welcome addition to one's life. Fast forward to the meeting with the lawyer. You arrive with your new diagnosis, likely feeling like a contestant on a bizarre game show. She then reveals her intention to terminate her parental rights. This woman's perspective on parenthood appears to be one of indifference and obligation. Just when one might assume that the worst has been revealed, she asserts that parenting is too challenging. This is an update to my previous account. I would like to extend my apologies to anyone who has sent me messages regarding my previous posts on this account. I had forgotten that I had it. I am not a frequent user of Reddit, but I have recently been engaging with TikTok, where I came across a video. In regard to an exceedingly dispiriting account on Reddit that brought to mind my own circumstances, it has been approximately 8 months since I last posted about my perplexing situation. Since then, numerous individuals have contacted me, expressing interest in my well-being and inquiring about the developments in my life. I am profoundly grateful to these individuals for their kind messages. I apologize for my delayed response. My life has been rather tumultuous in recent months, making it challenging to recall that these events occurred so long ago. To summarize the unfortunate series of events, first and foremost, the dissolution of my marriage was concluded without any complications or delays. I am still attempting to sell our former residence, but in the interim, we relocated to a different state. My former spouse is still pursuing the termination of my parental rights. I have only seen her 3 times since relocating, and that was to fly out for court. I was granted temporary full custody. Her request and proposal were processed, and she was not required to participate in any visits and has declined any offer. She has not seen my daughter in 7 months. I have not been in communication with her, and I am uncertain about her current circumstances, including whether she remains in a relationship with her former partner. I have limited my communication with her to a minimum, and she has done the same. I have provided her with numerous opportunities to visit my child, including video calls and flights. Before we relocated, I inquired weekly, but she consistently declined. Her parents continue to video call my daughter, and we hope they will be able to fly out over the summer to spend time with her. Additionally, my partner has terminated contact with them. The reason for this is unclear, and it is not within my power to reverse the decision. I have therefore come to accept the situation. I wish her well in all of her future endeavors. I will now proceed to discuss the positive developments. First and foremost, I am a proud Arizonan. I had not anticipated relocating here, but I have been pleased with the experience thus far. My parents have relocated with us, and I have not seen them so joyful in a long time. My daughter is thriving, and I am grateful for this positive outcome. In July, she will be 2 years old. She is the smartest and funniest child I have ever met. She knows her ABCs and can count to 20 without help. She loves animals and bugs in particular. She believes that farts and a cow mooing are the definition of comedy. She has no idea that this is not a normal reaction to flatulence. However, she has been my most powerful incentive to recover from this trauma and become my best self. I honestly have no idea how I contributed to the development of this personality. As her personality develops, I am increasingly aware of the admirable qualities she possesses. I could discuss her for hours, but I will refrain from doing so, as this article could easily become as lengthy as a Harry Potter novel. I have been in therapy for the past 8 months and have made significant progress. I am working to regain control of my health after gaining approximately 30 pounds due to stress. I am confident that I will achieve this goal in due time. It is a significant challenge for me. I have never been in a romantic relationship and have not attempted to be. I do not anticipate pursuing a romantic relationship in the near future. Primarily, I have adapted well to life as a single mother. I owe this adaptation to my family and friends, who have been a significant source of encouragement throughout this process. There have been some extremely challenging moments, and I anticipate that there will be more, but I will address these challenges in the best way I can and hope to emerge from them successfully. This is not the end of the world for me, despite how it may appear or feel in the moment. The sun will rise tomorrow, birds will chirp, and all will be okay. I am grateful to my therapist for providing me with these 2 sentences, which have been quite helpful to me. I apologize for the length of this post. I should definitely start journaling, perhaps even a blog, but I am grateful to everyone who took the time to offer me advice during this challenging time. This is a challenging period in my life, and I am grateful for your continued support. If you are reading this, I appreciate your attention. It is difficult to imagine a mother who would not want to see her child again. There must have been a significant event that caused this change in your ex-partner's behavior. She will eventually realize her mistake and regret it. It is encouraging to have parents who are supportive and available to provide guidance. Children grow up quickly, so it is essential to appreciate every moment with them. It is encouraging to learn that you are doing well. I wish you the best in your future endeavors. Your ex-partner's continued involvement in the child's life is beneficial. I have only seen my child 3 times in 8 months. It is evident that she is avoiding me. I believe her lawyers have accumulated frequent flyer miles from all the court appearances. However, you have full custody of your child, which is beneficial. She is counting to 20. Jokes about flatulence are. It is indeed a source of considerable amusement that genetics are proving to be a significant variable in this situation. Your relocation to Arizona represents a notable shift in circumstances. It is likely that you did not anticipate finding yourself in this new environment. However, it appears that you are thriving in the desert climate, enjoying a fulfilling lifestyle with the support of your parental figure and a youngster who finds vehicle movements amusing. This is an excellent example of finding joy in the simple things. Regarding the 36B item, it has been misplaced. However, it may still be on the to-do list. You are embracing the single-parent lifestyle with aplomb. It is understandable that you are not currently dating, given the emotional roller coaster you have been on. You deserve a vacation from the romantic insanity that we were dating for 2 years in college and married the fall after graduation. We spent 2 years exploring our relationship before settling down and preparing to start a family. Once she started taking birth control, her libido increased. Despite the use of birth control, it took 3 years to conceive. The couple finally had a daughter. After several months, the wife resumed birth control and experienced adverse effects. The couple discussed the possibility of another child but were uncertain. The husband had surgery 3 years ago, and since discontinuing birth control, the wife has reported improved sexual function and reduced anxiety. As we are no longer able to become pregnant, we have increased the frequency of our sexual activity. 3 weeks ago, my wife was late for her menstrual period, which is not uncommon for her. Subsequently, I observed that her breasts were sensitive, and she began exhibiting symptoms of morning sickness. I am aware that there have been instances where the process of nature has reversed the effects of a vasectomy. Therefore, I sought the advice of a medical professional. I underwent a sperm count examination, the results of which indicated that I remained sterile. However, I did not inform my wife of this finding. I eventually sought the advice of her physician, who confirmed her pregnancy. Consequently, she referred me to my own doctor for testing. Due to the stress of the situation, I initially postponed the appointment, but eventually underwent retesting. Furthermore, I had my child undergo a DNA test. I received both test results today, and I experienced severe nausea after reading them. I am indeed sterile, and my daughter is not mine. When my wife arrived home, I showed her my test results, and she denied any wrongdoing. She stated that there was an issue with the test. I showed her the test results from last week, and she burst into tears. I was able to persuade her to admit to the one-time occurrence of sexual intercourse with the individual in question, as well as the likelihood of a condom failure. I then proceeded to inquire about the details of the incident on 3 separate occasions, each time questioning the veracity of her statements and seeking further information. I made it clear that if she were to provide false information or withhold any pertinent details, our relationship would be irreparably damaged. She initially stated that it was the first time she had engaged in such behavior. I proceeded to inform her of the profound impact this had on me and inquired as to her rationale for engaging in such behavior with the potential to harm her family. I posed the question of whether the act was worth the cost. I then posed the ultimatum of whether she wished to initiate divorce proceedings and, if so, whether she was prepared to accept the consequences of such a decision. I informed her that I was unable to accept the responsibility of raising someone else's child and requested her willingness to terminate the pregnancy as a means of preserving our union. The remainder of the night was spent in grief. As we retired for the evening, she promised to do whatever was necessary to save our marriage. I did not bring up the DNA test. I will consult with a lawyer next week to discuss my options, including the possibility of paying child support for our first child. Had she been honest about the identity of the father of our first child, I could have overcome my pride and attempted to forgive her. However, she was under the impression that she was in the clear and therefore had no obligation to admit anything further. It is impossible to know what might have transpired had I been more forthcoming. My lawyer is highly competent. She requested that I provide a plethora of documents, including bank statements, medical records, and DNA results, and that I narrate my account to her. Her assistant was present throughout the proceedings and took comprehensive notes as my lawyer reviewed the aforementioned documents. Upon my conclusion, she posed a series of questions to me. I was asked a few questions and provided an explanation of my alternatives. I reside in a state where fault is a determining factor, which has both advantages and disadvantages. On the one hand, it provides us with leverage; on the other, it takes longer and is significantly more expensive in the event of the first child. If my wife signs the paperwork, my child support liability can be easily resolved. However, if she does not agree, a court order is necessary. A DNA test was ordered, and a court verdict can be used to remove me without my wife's agreement. In either case, I am unlikely to be required to pay child support. The other option is more expensive because my wife has an excellent career and earns close to what I do. She did not expect the judge to award her alimony and other benefits. Furthermore, property division and other issues can be resolved without the involvement of a judge. The involvement of a judge resulted in the unfortunate news that, due to the holiday season, the necessary paperwork could not be prepared before Christmas. However, it was confirmed that the judge would be available by the end of the year. I was instructed by the judge to refrain from making any comments until my wife was served. I was provided with a list of activities to complete before and after Christmas. One of the issues that was brought up was that, since we were actively trying to have a child, my wife may not have been aware that the child was not mine. My wife has an appointment with her OB tomorrow. It would be prudent to solicit the input of the community before taking any action. One option is to divorce her. She is a morally reprehensible individual. It would be a grave mistake to remain married to her. She is selfish and deceitful. She has not been forthcoming with you, and you will come to regret it. She is not the biological mother of your first daughter. The second daughter is also not hers. Paternity fraud should be considered a felony. It is possible that your wife has been engaging in this activity. It is likely that she feels secure in your relationship and enjoys sexual intimacy with her extramarital partner. If the affair has been ongoing for an extended period, it is probable that she is leading a double life. It would be advisable to ascertain the identity of the partner and to inform his wife and girlfriend. You may wish to consider having your name removed from the birth certificates to avoid being held financially responsible for another person's child. If you are considering remaining in the relationship, it would be reasonable to expect the biological father to provide child support. Given the circumstances, I would recommend terminating the relationship and pursuing a new one with a partner who respects and loves you unconditionally. It is crucial to find someone who accepts you for who you are and who is capable of providing you with the love and stability you deserve. After spending years building a life together, it is understandable that you would want to simplify things. However, the situation took an unexpected turn when she became pregnant. It is important to recognize that you were aware that exploring our relationship would potentially lead to her engaging in other romantic relationships. It is admirable that you were able to maintain your composure and take the initiative to get those DNA tests done. I would have probably acted similarly in your situation. The emotional distress caused by the anticipation of discovering that one's daughter is not one's biological child is significant. It is, however, a double whammy, as one is also faced with the challenge of informing one's spouse of this information. The latter may be best served by a paternity testing kit, as recommended by one's legal counsel. It may be beneficial to observe the approach taken by the aforementioned spouse in handling the subsequent challenges of the relationship. However, it is important to note that the return policy for the aforementioned paternity testing kit may not apply in this case. In the event of future children, it may be advisable to terminate this relationship and begin anew with someone who does not view family planning as a community activity. At the very least, this course of action would allow one to avoid any future unexpected guests in one's life. I met my sister at my residence and we proceeded to transfer my belongings to her domicile while the divorce proceedings were ongoing. This was either until the divorce was finalized or at least until my former spouse, my wife, and I took control of the house. We took Carlos to her place and returned for the remainder. My sister felt it was vital for her to be present to provide support and serve as a witness. Additionally, I placed the nanny cam in the living room so that I could record everything to the cloud at around 10. The total cost for the aforementioned services is $45. 10:45 p.m. I received a text message from the lawyer informing me that she had been served. I sent her an email stating that I would be at the house when she was ready to talk. A few minutes later, I received a text message from my wife, who provided an explanation for her actions. I then resent the original text message and waited for her to arrive home. She left multiple text messages and voicemails. There was no mention of infidelity. She presumed that we were negotiating a resolution and that we would convene to discuss the next steps before proceeding with the dissolution of marriage. She invoked the family unit, emphasizing how it would negatively impact the child and our respective families. She also expressed feelings of being misled. It was a particularly compelling display. She was still disclosing her location and it took her approximately 20 minutes to depart her place of employment. Subsequently, she proceeded to a nearby Walgreens for a brief period. The rationale behind her visit to Walgreens became apparent when a police vehicle arrived at her residence. According to the officers, she had requested their assistance due to concerns about the presence of firearms in the house. I presented the officers with evidence that my firearm was securely stored in an empty gun safe. I had relocated them to an alternative location. We returned to the living room, and I presented my wife with the paternity test results, which indicated that her daughter was not my biological child. Her response, which appeared genuine, was one of denial and disbelief. She became emotionally distressed and cried for approximately 10 minutes. I informed her that this was the final straw and the reason for my desire to end the marriage. The police officers advised me to maintain civility and departed after I informed them that I was departing shortly to reside at my sister's residence. Upon inquiring about the child's paternity, I was informed that the mother was uncertain of the identity of the child's father. I then inquired whether the mother was engaging in sexual intercourse with multiple males or if she was merely unaware of the child's father's identity. I further inquired about the frequency of the mother's infidelity. During the interim between pregnancies, she responded that there were only 2 children. I reminded her that I had previously stated that if she did not provide a complete account, I would be unable to continue the discussion. I also informed her that I was unable and unwilling to raise someone else's child and that she needed to identify the true father since I was not providing financial support. She inquired as to what we would tell our daughter. I informed her that it was up to her, as this was her responsibility, and that I would not accept blame or assume responsibility for her actions. I drafted a couple of emails last week, one for our friends and family, with copies of all the test results and reasons why I was filing for divorce. I drafted 2 emails, one for my wife and another for my lawyer. The latter included copies of the same tests as well as my own knowledge and previous statements. I then sought my lawyer's approval before sending copies to our friends and relatives. The majority of feedback was positive. I informed her that had she been truthful, we might have been able to resolve the matter amicably. However, given her history of deceit and infidelity, I was unable to trust her. I suggested that if she had undergone a tubal ligation instead of me having a vasectomy, the situation might have unfolded differently. I advised her to seek legal counsel so that we could move forward and begin the process of healing. We held our second meeting with the lawyers today and approved nearly everything, with the exception of the house. We are still awaiting the results of the appraisal to determine the split. The motions were filed today, and the court-ordered paternity test was scheduled for all 3 of us, as my soon-to-be ex-wife and I are both the biological parents of our child. My wife did not contest the majority of the allegations. Consequently, we filed a no-fault divorce petition. If the proceedings proceed as anticipated, I will regain possession of the house on February 15th, and the divorce will be finalized on April 5th. The lawyers were more effective at facilitating a separation and limiting the scope of our discussion. I was concerned when she arrived, appearing pale, and she appeared exhausted, and it was unclear whether this was due to a lack of sleep or overmedication. She simply stared out the window as the lawyers read everything to us before we signed some documents. As I walked out, I felt as though a significant burden had been lifted from my shoulders. HR has scheduled me for therapy tomorrow. My boss had placed a bottle of champagne was placed on my desk. He offered me some time off if I needed it, but I informed him that I was looking forward to returning to work. First and foremost, I understand your desire to end the marriage and distance yourself from the child. However, you must prepare to face harsh criticism because it is understandable that you believe you are abandoning the child, but it is not your place to decide whether or not this is the right decision for the child. If you know you cannot be a good father to this child, then leaving is the best option. While I feel sorry for the child, I believe that her mother's actions are to blame, not yours. I wish you the best of luck. The original poster replies, I could never be the kind of father she needs, she looks exactly like my ex. My wife and, consequently, I am reminded of her mother and the actions she took against me each time I look at her. I will miss her, but I am uncertain if I will be able to move on from this. Additionally, I would have to interact with my ex-wife, which is not ideal. The next individual expresses gratitude for respecting oneself and one's ex-partner. The wife is one of the most malevolent individuals, convincing you that you are the father and then taking it away with such ease. Do not believe her words, she was willing to let you raise someone else's children forever. You handled the situation perfectly, go for no contact and do not be a pushover. She committed 2 of the most egregious betrayals against you. Fortunately, in dealing with family and friends, it is advisable to follow the same course of action as the original poster, OP. Best of luck. The responses to this post indicate that the original poster, OP, should not believe the statements made by the other party. The other party's willingness to allow the original poster, OP, to raise someone else's children indefinitely, along with their reaction to the paternity test, appear to be credible. However, it is possible that the other party did not believe that the original poster, OP, was the father. The DNA test results may have been inconclusive. The paternity test results indicated that there was no biological link between us, which made it evident that I was not the father. However, it is likely that the rest of her statements are also untruthful. It has undoubtedly been a tumultuous journey. It is akin to living an episode of the Jerry Springer Show, but with fewer physical altercations and more administrative procedures. Your sister has been a source of emotional support throughout this ordeal. It is important to acknowledge the role she has played in your life. The chaos could call on the nanny cam. It might as well turn your living room into a reality TV set. Your soon-to-be ex-spouse is served with divorce papers. She goes full drama queen, sending you a barrage of texts and messages about betrayal and family devastation. She even brings the cops into it because of course she's suddenly scared of you and you're not. The classic move is to accuse the other party of criminal activity, which is a clear indication of victimization. The subsequent refusal to accept responsibility for one's actions is a common tactic, as is the denial of the truth. In this case, the individual in question exhibited a notable level of distress and disbelief when confronted with the paternity test results. She even engaged in a prolonged display of emotional distress, which could be interpreted as a rehearsed response. She claims to be uncertain, stating that she has been preoccupied with numerous tasks or that her recollection of events is selective. The emails are drafted, and the act of sending the test results to friends and family can be perceived as a strategic move. However, the group chats are currently active, and the involvement of your lawyer in the process is noteworthy. The lawyer has approved the terms of the separation agreement. The custody arrangements for the child are a significant challenge, but it seems that you are making the most appropriate decision for your own well-being. Those who are critical of your decision should not influence your actions, as they are not experiencing the same difficulties you are. Therefore, I wish you well in your future endeavors and hope that you will experience a positive change in your life. I would like to express my gratitude for your attention to today's narratives. If you found them engaging, I kindly request that you indicate your appreciation by clicking the like button and subscribing to my channel. If you have not yet done so, I also encourage you to leave a comment below, sharing your insights on the events that transpired. I wish you a pleasant day.